November the 7th, 2016. The clerk this evening is Ms. Jane Armstrong, and I want to first recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations. We will be having two portions of the meeting. There's going to be a recess at 9 p.m. for approximately 10 minutes. So I'd like to call the meeting into order and introduction of late items, please, Ms. Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff is recommending that this evening's agenda be amended as follows. Remove item 5B, which was a presentation by the Chamber of Commerce regarding Business Walk event. Add item 7C, property maintenance bylaw. We want to remove 480 McClary Street and 9030 and 9040 Terminal Avenue. Agenda item 9B, development permit number 1014 on Vancouver Avenue. We want to add two delegations, Ms. Reed and Mr. Dice. Remove agenda item 9D, bylaw contravention notice for construction without a building permit. 10A, number suite 108, 5854 Turner Road. Agenda item 9F, bylaw contravention notice regarding secondary suites. Remove 254 Emery Way. Agenda item 9G, unauthorized suites. Remove 424 Bruce Avenue. Agenda item 14A, notice of motion regarding secondary suite enforcement. Add a delegation, Mr. Bonner. Agenda item 15, core services report and delegation. Add the following delegations regarding gender-specific guarding, and note that all these delegates will have a maximum speaking time of 5 minutes. Ms. Catherine Davis, Mr. Matthew O'Donnell, Mr. Kevin Story, Ms. Sarah Schmidt, Ms. Vicki Bertram, Ms. Leslie Clark from the Nanaimo Women's Centre, Mr. Terry Lee Wagger, Mr. Tim McGrath, Mr. Don Bonner, Mr. Blaine Curry, QP. Also, Councillor Kipp, I believe you wanted to add a late delegation as well under this same agenda item. Thank you. As well, Councillor Fuller, I believe you wanted to amend the agenda to introduce a motion to reconsider Council Resolution 51316 following the Civic Merit Awards.
Yes. Can you please explain what that one is? Reconsideration of?
It's Council Resolution 51316. That is regarding the motion regarding the staff reduction for the Nanaimo jailhouse.
Thank you. Are there any other late items? Councillor Kipp? Okay, I'll take you off that then. Thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Yes, Mr. Armstrong, it's a rise and report from our previous in-camera meeting under other business.
Thank you. Are there any other items, Council? Seeing none. We have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Thorpe and seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item. Motion for the adoption of the minutes of the special meeting of Council for October 6th.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Pratt and seconded by Councillor Beswick. Thank you. Discussion, errors and omissions. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So the next item is I am to present, in actual fact, Councillor Thorpe is going to be our MC tonight, and it's to present the 2016 Civic Merit Awards. So, Councillor Thorpe, if you want to proceed, I will walk the hallway.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. We've got a rather lengthy agenda tonight with a lot of interesting topics on it, but I think I can probably say safely this first item might be the most enjoyable part of the evening for many of you here, because it gives us a chance to recognize and to say congratulations to members of our community who have achieved excellence in their various fields. For the benefit of viewers and some in the audience who might not be aware, Nanaimo City Council presents certificates of congratulations and medallions to individuals, groups, teams, and clubs who through their endeavors have brought recognition on a provincial, Western Canadian, national, or international level to our city. And tonight, we are recognizing a total of 46 athletes, coaches, and performers who have brought honor to our city through their outstanding performances at provincial, national, and international championships. So we have 2 organizations who have won gold at the provincial level during the past year, and I'll be calling them down in just a moment, the Nanaimo Youth Choir and also the Nanaimo Raiders Field Lacrosse team. We have representatives from the Nanaimo Lawn Bowling Club who earned gold at the national level, and gold in an international event. We have members of the Wellington Secondary Jazz Academy. Just so we understand how we'll proceed this evening, because we do want to try and do this as efficiently as possible, throughout the ceremony, each group of recipients will be called to the front as a group, and I would ask that that group, when I call your group name, come just down to this area in front of me. Each member will then be named individually, and when your name is called, please proceed to my right, where Councillor Brennan and Councillor Pratt and Parks and Recreation Director Richard Harding and Tara Fedosoff from our staff will be handing out medallions, first of all, and certificates on either side of the podium. And then each individual, after you receive your medallion and certificate, if you would proceed further in that direction, Mayor McKay will be over on that side to get a picture taken with you, and hopefully we can run through this as quickly as possible. So the first medal presentations are for gold medal winners at a provincial level, and the first presentation tonight will be to the Nanaimo Youth Choir. I'm going to ask the gold medalists from the 2016 BC Festival of the Arts to please come down just in front of me in this area here. Squeeze on down. And we recognize that not everybody is able to make it here this evening, but I am going to read all of the names, and if you are here, if you would just move, as I said, over to where Councillor Brennan and Mr. Harding are and receive your medallion, and then through on to get your certificate, and then a photo opportunity. So tonight's recipients were first place in the Youth 16 and Under category at the 2016 BC Festival of the Arts. And we'll start with Charmaine Sims. Charmaine? And then we have Katrin Hannison. Maria Clemente. Not here. Thank you. Ella Hannison. Taryn Pister, Sean Haggerty, Sarah Osborne, Alaria Lassard, Laura Hansen, Sophie Dugas, Andrea Stackow, not here. How about Laura Stackow? No, we're missing the sisters. Then we'll move to Dominic Skelcher. Emma Britton. Sophia Fan. And certainly not least, choir director Marion Smith. And I would just like to note, everybody, thank you. Thank you. I would just like to note that this is the 7th consecutive provincial title for the Nanaimo Youth Choir. Again, congratulations. Now, our next presentation will be to members of the Nanaimo Raiders field lacrosse team. I'm going to ask the gold medalists from the 2016 U15 Provincial Field Lacrosse Championships to please come down to the area in front of me.
What's with the hats?
Tonight's recipients are members of the lacrosse team, which won the 2016 U15 Provincial Field Lacrosse Championships, which took place in Langley on February 5th to the 8th. We're going to start with Will Cookman. Chris Harris. Jaden Tomiyama. Andrew Mullen. Aidan Cateau. Fisher Zawoski. Evan Susi. Brendan Olson. No Brendan. Isaac Projniski. Not here. James Wise. Next is Jake McGonigal. Carson Gregory. Parker Davey. Braden Schuler. Next is Will Hawthornthwaite. Mackenzie Nordley. Not here, thank you. Duncan Tate. Dawson Wassel. No. Jordan Aylward. No Jordan. Corbin James. No. Matt Kroll. There we go. The coach of the team, Shane Terrace. Assistant coach, Jordan Terrace. Assistant coach Ken Gregory is not here this evening, but we do have the team manager, Brandy Terrace. Congratulations on a successful showing. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our next presentation is for a gold medal finish at the national level at the Canadian Championship for Blind and Visually Impaired Lawn Bowlers, held in Ladner, BC, September 12th to the 18th. And tonight we are honoring Gus Thorne and also his coach, Don Sherry, for winning gold in the 2016 B1 Totally Blind category. Don Sherry not able to be with us this evening. Gus Thorne, gold medal winner. And our congratulations again to Gus and his coach, Don Sherry. And ladies and gentlemen, our final presentation of the evening acknowledges a gold medal performance at an international event. On April 8th to 10th in Monterey, California, 2 members of the Wellington Secondary School Jazz Academy performed at the 2016 Next Generation Jazz Festival and earned gold in the combo division. Will Ethan Olenek, Kenton Dick, and Wellington Secondary Band instructor Carmelo Luvisoto please come down in front of me? And I know a couple of our musicians are not here this evening. I understand that both Ethan and Kenton are in fact studying abroad, and therefore we're really pleased to have their parents accepting on their behalf tonight. So, Ethan Olenek, Kenton Dick, and Carmelo Luvisoto, please come forward and receive your medallions. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the award presentations for tonight. On behalf of Nanaimo City Council, congratulations to everyone on your achievements, and thank you for attending. Have a wonderful night. And Parks and Recreation Director Richard Harding is just asking if I would make mention that for future recognition occasions, if you are aware of athletes or performers, anybody in our community who has achieved excellence at a provincial or higher level, nomination forms for this recognition are available on the city website. So please check that out. We always enjoy recognizing people from our community who bring honor to our city. Thank you very much.
Yes, I guess you are.
Billy. Well, everybody else in the audience is do we want to move forward? The agenda?
You may, sure.
Maybe close the door.
So whatever reason.
Well, the mayor, yeah, so, yeah,
Yeah.
sit down, let's move forward.
Okay, where are we? There we go. Okay. All right, so we will move on with the agenda. As per the agenda, I have a... Okay. I have a reconsideration motion to make, and then following that, if that reconsideration motion passes, I have another alternate motion to make as well. Oh, here comes Mayor. Awesome. Where are we, Councillor?
I'm going to make my reconsideration motion.
Okay. Councillor Fuller.
Alrighty. So I'd like to make a motion that council resolution. What? Well, that's what I'm doing. It's a reconsideration motion, so I have to make a motion to reconsider. I got it. It's right here. That council resolution number 51.316 regarding the Core Services Review Nanaimo Jail Staff Reduction Report be reconsidered.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Fuller and seconded by Councillor Pratt. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, now I have a follow-up motion to make.
Okay. Councillor Fuller.
So I'd like to make the following motion. That council adopt Core Services Review final report recommendation to reduce the number of guards per shift from 2 employees to 1 employee. That council direct staff to schedule a female guard on call for those shifts where a male is on duty. Direct staff to monitor and report back on the new guarding process up to 12 months from the date it starts. Direct staff to work with the RCMP to address implementation of new guarding process. And direct staff to work with the Public Safety Committee to make recommendations on a strategy to address this as part of the social wellness strategy and options for working with key community stakeholders.
Okay, it's moved by Councillor Fuller and seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Now, we have 13 delegations on this, Ms. Armstrong. So, Councillor Bestwick.
Sorry? Oh, there we go. With a motion on the floor that's been seconded, it's my understanding that we are in a position to debate the motion, discuss the motion, and vote on the motion. I stand corrected if I'm incorrect.
The motion can be voted on now. It can be tabled and then considered later during this meeting.
So our practice is that delegations are heard before debate. So I really don't want to vote on this motion until such time as the delegations have spoken.
This is a different situation, Your Worship. It's a reconsideration, so there aren't any delegations to a report. It's a procedural motion that came in front of you, and the practice is to have the delegations for the core services go under that agenda item.
Councillor Brennan.
I think that the procedural motion has been done and passed. There is now a new motion on the floor, not procedural at all. In fact, it's a new motion. And it's been moved and seconded. So I would move that we table the motion to allow the delegations to speak.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to table until after the delegations have spoken. Call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Bestwick is opposed. Motion passes.
And now on another procedural motion, I would move that the delegations be moved up to now so that this item can be dealt with as the councillor had hoped.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan to move that item to the move the delegations forward. Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Any discussion on moving them forward? Councillor Hong?
Thank you. I just want to make sure that everybody on this list is here, because I don't want them to think that they were at the end of the agenda and that they were going to come at 9 o'clock to speak, and then we've moved them all up to here
I think that's a good point.
So I like to know if everybody is on that wants to speak is here. If not, you guys aren't here, then you have to wait till the end, just to be fair. So I would like to know.
We'll call out their names.
Then we would just, ladies and gentlemen, then I would suggest we leave it where it is at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you wish to withdraw your motion?
Yes.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Pratt, Brennan, Ms. Sammer. Do you have anything further to add? Okay. Very good. Thank you. I'll clear the queue.
If
There are
I,
a number of different speakers.
if I could
Councillor
explain,
Brennan.
can I explain why I withdrew? Because I think Councillor Pratt, who seconded it, is not sure why I would do that. And it was because I think there are people who were registered to speak and they're not here. Because it was to be heard later in the agenda, so I thought that we should accommodate that.
I think we're fine. Councillor Kipp, on the point of order.
Does a roll call work in this situation to ask and advise if no one is here, or if they're all here?
Or
leave it to the end.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
happy.
you. I'm going to ask the clerk. The fact is that the scheduled time of the meeting is at 7 p.m. Anybody who wishes to speak, notwithstanding the fact that it's at the end of the agenda, needs to realize, or we need to be able to exercise the modification of our procedure bylaw by 2/3 vote of council to move an item on the agenda.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
I won't withdraw then.
Your worship,
I just-
what are you trying to achieve with your, can I speak?
The motion, the motion to table until later,
Yes, that was passed.
correct. Now we need to consider, as has been suggested, that, as Councillor Hong has suggested, that by doing so, you're going to permit other people who may be believed that they wouldn't be speaking until maybe 10 o'clock tonight, the opportunity to speak. And all I'm suggesting is to clarify the point that we have the ability at any time to set aside our procedure bylaw based on the procedure bylaw. In other words, moving them from the back to the front would not, is council's purview.
There is a motion that, to suspend the rules under
Correct.
Robert's Rules of Order, 2/3 vote. Our procedure bylaw is silent, but where it's silent, we follow Robert's Rules of Order. Why are we suspending the rules to accommodate, just so we're clear, to accommodate what?
As it stands right now,
Withdrawing.
we're
I'm
not.
withdrawing, no.
My understanding was that the motion
Oh,
to
pardon me.
move delegations forward was
That's correct.
withdrawn by the movement.
No, I didn't get an okay with the seconder, and I defer to her better judgment.
I'd just like to speak on this. I think that the motion and the delegations go together, so I don't really care where they are in the agenda. I think they should be together. So if we are going to assume that some people aren't here and ready to speak, then we can move it till later in the agenda. Would that work? Would that be fine?
Let's just.
I just want this item, a motion made, and then we hear from delegations. I don't want the motion discussed and voted on, and then we have 10 delegations later on in the meeting speaking to it. That makes no sense at all. So let's bring them together in the agenda wherever.
Do it now.
No, we didn't.
So it's already been, so they've already,
We moved the delegation.
Council, I'm trying to listen to the clerk here.
My understanding is that the motion for reconsideration has been tabled and that council was looking at a motion to move the agenda item
Right.
to the end.
Okay. Thank you. If that's the motion, then I'm happy with that.
No,
The end of the
no,
agenda.
no.
Councillor Fuller? Yeah. As the mover of the reconsideration motion,
It's been voted on.
are you comfortable moving it to the end of the agenda?
Yeah, always have it, sure. I'm good.
Your Worship, on a point of order, the motion to reconsider was voted on.
Yeah.
It was voted on, and it was
That was
passed.
voted on, that's been passed, but we're
Yes, so
gonna,
now there's a new motion on the floor.
there's a new motion on the table that has been moved to the end of the agenda following the
Prior to the
delegates who are
delegations,
speaking.
and then they can speak to it.
Actually,
Or after
Uh,
the
you know,
delegation.
that's-
Yes,
that-
that's not
that-
what I understood.
I made the motion, the seconder seconded it. No, she didn't actually second that motion to move to the end, so.
So you put forward, Councillor Brennan, you put forward a motion, as I understand it. Councillor Fuller brought forward his motion. His motion was accepted by council.
Yes.
That's right. Then Councillor Brennan brought forward a subsequent motion.
He made the motion.
Councillor Fuller made the
You
motion.
tabled it.
Councillor
And we
Fuller
tabled
put
it.
forward a motion to reconsider. That was passed. He then put forward another motion. There was a motion from council to table that motion. That was passed. Then Councillor Brennan put forward a motion, which was withdrawn, to move
The delegation.
that Councillor Fuller's new motion to the end of the agenda. So for clarification, it will, if it's okay with Councillor Fuller, it will be moved to the end of the agenda after the delegates have spoken on the Core Services Review Report regarding jailhouse staff reduction.
Councillor Brennan.
I thought the motion was to table the main motion and to bring the delegations forward. That was the motion.
But
That
there
was
was
the
a,
motion.
but
And after it was moved and seconded, Councillor Hong said, I'm not sure that's a good idea because I don't know if all of the people who want to speak are here. At which point I said, well, maybe we should withdraw it, or I'll withdraw it. Councillor Pratt did not agree to that, so the motion remains tabling it and to now and moving the delegations up. Once the delegations have spoken, we'll lift it from the table and debate it.
Councillor Pratt.
Councillor Brennan, I think you misunderstood me. What I want is for the motion and the delegates to remain intact together. And since we're not sure everybody's here to speak to it, because some people thought it was later in the agenda, we should move the whole thing to the end of the agenda. And that way, we are assured that everybody is there. Now, I'm seeing people in the audience shaking their heads and if everybody is here, maybe we better take a roll call and find out if everybody's here. Maybe that would be the easiest way to do it.
There's a motion on the floor right now. There's a motion on the floor. That motion has been withdrawn.
Table the motion as presented by Councillor Fuller, and until such time as we'd heard from the delegations and that they be moved forward to now.
Okay.
That's what the motion was.
Councillor Fuller's main motion was tabled. Councillor Brennan, I believe you made a motion to bring the delegates up. That motion was withdrawn on hearing from
wasn't withdrawn.
Councillor
You
Hong.
did withdraw it.
Let the city clerk finish with her deliberations here for you. She's here to support you.
Well, I clearly remember that I said to move the delegations up to now. That was the motion. And then there was some discussion about whether it should be at the end.
We can move forward if you would like to make another motion on the table.
Thank you.
Our records show that it was withdrawn.
Thank you.
But
Thank
you needed to get the okay of the seconder.
Councillor Brennan, as per the advice of the clerk,
Yes. So you want me to make a new
if you
motion?
wish to make a motion,
I would move that we move the delegations up to now and that we allow them to speak, and then the motion, then Councillor Fuller's motion be debated.
thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Any discussion?
That's what I said.
I don't care.
There's enough.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? I see no other speakers. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right. So now, Ms. Armstrong, for the record, for the delegations, for their benefit, can we read the motion that we're going to be discussing, that their delegations are going to be? It's reconsideration of 51316.
No, it's a new motion.
That's the subject matter.
That motion has been tabled. The main motion by Councillor Fuller has now been tabled. A motion has been passed to allow the delegates to speak
Okay.
now, so I suggest that we begin
Very
that
good.
process.
Thank you. All right, so we've got, I wonder if, I'm going to read them out in a roll call fashion, and so everybody's got them. I'm not sure everybody's got the latest agenda in front of them. So they are, first off, number one, well, I've got her number 3.
Lauren,
Pardon me. First one is, who's number 2? Jeez. Pardon me?
Ms. Lauren Semple
Is
is
number
the
1.
first
Number
speaker.
2 is
Ms. June Ross.
June Ross, thank you. Number 3 is Ms. Catherine Davis. Number 4, Mr. Matthew O'Donnell. Number 5, Mr. Kevin Story. Number 6, Ms. Sarah Schmidt. Number 7, Ms. Vicki Bertram. Number 8, Ms. Leslie Clark. Number 9, Mr. Terry Lee Wager. Number 10, Mr. Tim McGrath. Number 11, Mr. Don Bonner. Number 12, Mr. Blaine Gurry. And number 13, Ms. Denise Rice. Ms. Semple. So everyone will receive 5 minutes, and I would caution the gallery that this needs to be a safe place for everyone to be and to have open and democratic debate, and that clapping, booing, anything that would make anyone in the room feel unsafe is not permitted. So, there's going to be varying opinions tonight, and everybody needs to be heard in a safe place. Ms. Semple.
Thank you. Your Worship, councillors, I am here tonight to ask you to reconsider and rescind your motion made on October 24th, which reduced the amount of guards for our RCMP holding cells and ended gender-specific guarding. I thought a lot about what I could say tonight in 5 minutes, to open your ears and your minds, what I could say to convince just one of you to change your vote. But the truth is that all of the facts and figures and solid reasoning supporting this have already been provided to you. The Human Rights Tribunal and Supreme Court have already heard the cases, and all of our community experts and advocates have said their piece, or will be saying so tonight. Gender-specific guarding of those in lockup during intimate situations such as undress, sleep, washroom use, and feminine hygiene is the standard in provincial and federal corrections, and since 2004 has been the practice here in Nanaimo. Even when considered again in 2009, a prior council chose to continue this invaluable practice, which helps to protect the safety, well-being, and dignity of some of our most vulnerable community members, while subsequently bringing substantive equality to an employment sector plagued by gender segregation. I don't understand how a council far more progressive and inclusive and open-minded than those before it would be the one to end this. A council who just this year supported the largest pride celebration our community has ever seen, and the third largest in this province. The council who painted 2 beautiful rainbow crosswalks as a symbol of inclusion and solidarity. It deeply disappoints me now that a council I was proud of has decided to put a price tag on basic human rights and send a much darker message to the world about what our community values. I never expected this council, the council I helped elect, would take such a large step backwards by looking to other municipalities in this province and saying, well, if they're not doing it, then why should we? After 12 years, we should be the champion of this issue, looking to other municipalities to say, why aren't you doing this? Challenging them to step forward with us, putting Nanaimo out there as the progressive city that cares and will stand for those at risk. As I stated before, the points in favor of gender-specific guarding within municipal law enforcement are strong ones and should be deeply known to each of you by now. Points such as the importance of protecting women from systemic objectification and abuse, including our most vulnerable and marginalized community members, Indigenous women, the mentally ill, transgender individuals, and children. Points such as the need to exercise progressive action and push back against the societal norms steeped in rape culture, misogyny, and victim blaming, instead of insisting that the responsibility to report rests on these vulnerable women who are often the victims of abuse in their past, all while claiming in the same breath that those in cells are beyond dignity and without shame. Points such as the fact that taking steps to protect and support an oppressed and dehumanized demographic does not automatically discriminate or lay blame upon those who are not a part of it. The truth is, this policy just makes sense from both a human rights and a labor relations aspect. Please do not be the council who kills it. Please do not be the council who kills it due to personal infighting and conflict. Please don't dig in your heels against reconsideration for fear of looking bad. If this decision is not rescinded, it will have a negative impact, not only on those who are at risk and vulnerable within our community, but on each of you as politicians, and also the public image of our community. This is not a threat, but a bleak reality. It takes courage to reconsider. It takes courage to say, I was wrong. It takes courage to represent our community in a progressive and bold way. So I ask you, please have courage and help to build an Nanaimo that not only I, but all British Columbians can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions for you. I neglected to ask you your city of residence.
130 Rose Hill Street, Nanaimo.
Thank you very much. Very good. Motion to receive the delegation. Councilor. Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Brennan, and seconded by Councillor Pratt. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is Ms. June Ross.
Good evening, all of you, and thank you again for having us all
Your
here.
city of
My
residence,
name is
please.
June Ross, and I'm a citizen of the city of Nanaimo. I've got a couple of issues here, I guess. When I look at your strategic plan update from June of 2016, it talks about social equity, and it talks about treating our most vulnerable with dignity and respect. And by cutting down the guarding, which is what I'm hearing is possibility here, and by removing what you had removed was the gender-specific guarding, you are not living up to what you indicated in this draft, the strategic plan draft. I'm very frustrated because I was here before previous councils in 2004 and again in 2009. I was a part of the many groups that came together to take on this issue when it was tried to be eliminated back in time. It's such a bloody waste of energy and goodwill between council and the citizens out here. And you can't afford to be doing that. We can't afford to have continual angst with you either. It doesn't bode well for our city. So you really need to sit back and have a look at things. I'm not going to spend an inordinate amount of time putting out to you what has already been said many times by those of us who did the arguments with various councils previously. I have sent the major documents to all of you, and I'm hopeful that you have taken the time to read them. You've also been sent a huge pile of documents from the CUPE local, and I'm also hoping that you have paid attention to that as well. I'm going to give you a definition of equality, and it's called substantive equality. The courts and many equality seekers have a broader view of equality one that is often called substantive equality. A substantive equality approach recognizes that patterns of disadvantage and oppression exist in society and requires that lawmakers and government officials take this into account in their actions. It examines the impact of law within its surrounding social context to make sure that laws and policies promote full participation in society by everyone, regardless of personal characteristics or group membership. Substantive equality requires challenging common stereotypes about group characteristics that may underlie law or government action, as well as ensuring that important differences in life experience, as viewed by the equality seeker, are taken into account. And this is from the Supreme Court of Canada, so that you're aware. I've got copies of what I've said here, and there is a link that you can go on to. What I wanted to spend time here with, and I'm wondering why I didn't get answers to questions. I had written to numbers of you individually. I had spoken to several of you individually, and I don't know why I didn't get answers to my questions. The majority of those were for Councillor Yoakum. I think that QP Local 401 has clearly shown that the $360,000 figure that was thrown out to you is an absolute fallacy. So I would ask that you remember that. Probably the most that you would save in cutting back is $30,000 or $40,000 from my understanding. I never did get an answer to the question about where did the $360 come from? How was that calculated? Of the numbers of women detained over the past year, how many were First Nations? Does anybody know? Is there any way you could find out, or?
Not in time for this debate, ma'am.
Pardon?
Not in time for this debate. You got 10 seconds.
The Zuni Nemo were also a part of our groups, and I don't know whether they were ever consulted in any of the voting that was done. So in closing, I'm requesting on behalf of the women in this room and on behalf of the women in our community that you reconsider the motion that was made to end the gender-specific guarding and redo a motion to uphold the guarding as it currently exists.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't see any. Councillor Bestwick has questions for you.
Thank you. Thank you, June. Not a question, but just a comment as it relates, because there is a viewing audience. You and I engaged in a very wholesome and fulsome discussion on the phone. You were my wake-up call. So you and I actually, we had a very good exchange. Mm-hmm. So when you state that I didn't, you didn't state me specifically,
no, it wasn't.
But the impression could be that you and I have not spoken. And I just want everybody to know that you and I had a very good, wholesome, fulsome, respectful discussion on this topic on Saturday morning following the Monday decision at approximately 8 a.m. to 8:43 a.m.
No, I never implied that you had done that either. So thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
I'll pass around.
No further questions for you. Motion to receive the delegation.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is Ms. Catherine Davis. Good evening, Ms. Davis. We can just have your city of residence, please.
Good evening. My residence is Nanaimo. My name is Catherine Kinlock Davis, and I'm putting my middle name in for a reason. I want to thank you for allowing us to reconsider your mistaken motion. It has been said that we are what we eat. The kind of food that we put into our bodies often does determine the state of our physical health, the shine of our hair, the white and strength of our teeth, whether our hearts and veins are free of obstruction, and whether our bones are strong. We are told that prevention is the best medicine. For those of us who have post-traumatic stress disorder or are bipolar, have other issues related to mental health, we are most often what we experience. This applies to people of all genders, all colors, and all ages. For some of us, we are what we have been taught in our family homes, in schools, and in churches. In some countries, nudity is not a big deal. In other countries, it is a crime. Last week, Gordon Fuller said with vehemence that prevention is the cure. I agree with that statement. Unfortunately, many are already stricken with mental health issues, addiction, alcoholism, serial abuse issues that are physical, emotional, and often caused by repeat sexual violence. By the time a person gets to a city lockup, for whatever reason, the damage may have already been done. Many tonight will give you studies and statistics. These are important. Also important are the stories that you will hear. I heard Jim Kipp say, "these people," in reference to women who end up in a holding cell. Well, I'm one of these people. What if your wife was accused of drinking and driving and landed in the Nanaimo jail? Does she somehow lose her right to dignity, privacy, and respect for her person because she has been accused of something? I have been in detention and jail twice. The first time I was 13. I fled an incredibly abusive situation. I was charged with nothing, strip searched, and subjected to the loss of my liberty. As a child, no one in our strict Presbyterian family ever undressed in front of anyone, including family members. The experience of both places was excruciating, embarrassing, and humiliating. I felt violated. I was terrified. I was appalled that male guards were allowed to view people at their toilet. I witnessed sexual abuse of very young girls at the hands of people who were supposed to be in positions of trust. I witnessed, times have changed, Councillor Bestwick says. Not so much, I say, having witnessed what happened to Willow Kinloch on May 6, 2005, tethered to a door, choked and manhandled by guards and police. She won a settlement of $60,000. Like many other women, I have suffered abuse at the hands of persons in positions of power that were supposed to be trustworthy. I have been molested, raped, and beaten by people who were charged with my care. My experience shaped who I am. They affected my education, my relationships, and my parenting. Small wonder that at times I come across as an upset, defensive person. I have not been to council in almost 2 years because I cannot deal with a room full of police, and there are many others like me. My daughter was in the Nanaimo lockup in 1987, charged with nothing, lying on a cold cement floor, clothes in disarray, and suffering from alcohol poisoning. No female in sight. I had to take her to the hospital, and thank God she doesn't remember. Why are we trying to fix a program that is not broken? People fall through the cracks in all kinds of situations. We have perhaps 40,000 females in Nanaimo. That's $5 per female to ensure that women feel safe and have their dignity protected. No women have had to worry about male guards in our lockup since 2004. That means no lawsuits. We are the most progressive jail in the province. Like Gord said, prevention is the cure. It's also called risk management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pratt has a question for you.
I actually don't have a question. I just want to say thank you so much for having the courage to come forward and speak the way you did about very private things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next one is Mr. Matthew O'Donnell. I thought I saw Mr. O'Donnell. Okay. Mr. Kevin Story.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Councillor Fuller for bringing this back and for Council supporting his motion. My presentation was in two parts, but I'll only have time for one. The second part is available if there's questions afterwards. It has always been my contention that as a community, our greatest attribute is, and always should be, the protection of the most vulnerable amongst us. In this case, we talk about the fear that some women have with male authority figures witnessing them at their weakest point. Recognizing that this addresses a rather small amount of people does not negate the fact that to these women, the fear is extremely real. As any of us may say, I can't recognize that fear, and that's true. So what do we do? If we believe these women are telling the truth, then as members of the human race, we must honor their feelings and support them. Anyone who is familiar with addictions, in particular, knows that the addict, either male or female, will reach a point in their active addiction where they have lost complete control of themselves and their lives, and the brutal reality of addiction is in complete control.
Councillor Bestwick.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
I'm sorry to disrupt you. Could you please just pull the microphone down just a little bit?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'm a little wobbly on my legs tonight. If you think an addict is full-blown activity has any control over themselves, then relate that to trying to control the symptoms of bowel disease. It looks messy and tends to revolt the onlooker. For the person or addict suffering through this phase, it is humiliating to the point of destroying any belief that they will ever get better. This is the way some of the women find themselves when they arrive at our cells. It leads to a form of self-loathing and guilt that is so profound, the average person will never be able to understand it. Having anybody witness them in this state is frightening and cripples self-respect and dignity. Combine that with the absolute fear of a male-dominant figure witnessing it heightens their fear beyond comprehension. These fears are usually cemented in reality from previous abuse and cannot go unrecognized. The end result of this litany of fear and abuse can lead to the most horrendous results. The permanent mental instability to the point of suicide when the person sees no way out. I have witnessed this myself, and it's very ugly. Now, the proponents of changing the bylaw bring up some good points. Saving $360,000 looks good at the outset, but the debate has raged. We have discovered that that just isn't the case. The core review states that 4 jobs will be eliminated. Thank you. Yeah.
Take your time.
Okay. Not true. Sorry, folks. My legs are wobbly tonight. No jobs will be eliminated. The schedules will be reshuffled, and no one will be laid off. The review states that we employ 9 guards, only 9. It is policy already that if there are 11 more people in the cells, an extra guard is called in. This, according to the union rep, happens most of the time. If the article is correct that was in the paper. My understanding is that Mr. Curry was speaking afterwards. So I would suggest that the financial argument bears no water. Then there's the old bugaboo about hiring discrimination, a word bandied about when nothing else works. Hire the best person for the job, they yell, for all to hear, as if they were the great protectors of all that is good and decent. At any cost, we must protect the sanctity of openness in hiring the very best person for the job. Or they scream that we are being sexist and favoring women over men. Another classic example of the rights of men, LGBTQ folks, gays, and lesbians, all being trampled to advance the cause of militant women's groups, they claim. Balderdash. First of all, the most qualified person to care for, or guard if you wish, a highly vulnerable woman is, wait for it, another well-trained woman. Imagine that, if you will. Astonishing. Then they start to yell about other groups. Are you going to hire Muslims to protect Muslims? Aboriginals, gays for gays, men for men. Well, folks, there's been no expression of fear from these groups in our society, and quite frankly, I'd find that offensive.
Mr. Story, your time is up.
I will summarize then.
Mr. Story, your time is up.
One quick one.
One quick one.
As Nelson Mandela said, when you believe yourself to be right, you stand up. You may stand alone, but you stand up. Being the only one will be the way until eventually there is two. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I don't see any questions. Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next delegation is Ms. Sarah Schmidt. Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. I need your name and place of residence.
My name is Sarah Schmidt. I reside on Snuneymuxw unceded territory, also known as Nanaimo.
Okay.
Thank you for reconsidering this motion, although it's only reconsidering part of it. We've had a lot of people talking about statistics over the past several weeks, and I'd like to bring this into the personal because the personal is political and the political is personal. And we heard Catherine's stories, and I'd like to say that they're not stories and they're not unique. And it's still going on, not necessarily in Nanaimo as we speak, but it still goes on. I was a house parent in a group home for high-risk teens. I lived with those teenagers. It was the home of last resort. Once they were gone from our home, there wasn't much left for them. Most of them were street involved. One girl was with me for 4 years, and I think she was about 15 at the time that these incidents happened. I got a call from the payphone in front of the crack house, from the people from the crack house that were so worried about this girl that she was going to die on them. We'd get calls from the RCMP. We'd have huge interagency meetings because, and I quote, they were worried they were going to find her dead behind a dumpster. So our strategy was she had a red zone, and we were going to catch her in that red zone, and we were going to get her on a breach of probation, so we'd get her in kiddie jail in Victoria. And we did that because that was the only way we were going to get her detoxed and get her immune system up, get some nutrition into her, and hopefully keep her alive another year. Months after she returned, the Crown prosecutor called and wanted us to go and talk to him. So she came with me, and he wanted her to press charges and testify against the guard in kiddie jail that had raped her. It was surreal. We tried our best to get her somewhere where people were going to take care of her, and in spite of all the cameras and the precautions, some man in that facility raped her. To this day, I can't believe that. It's just, these were the people that were supposed to take care of her, as Catherine said. And there's another piece to this, having told that story. There's been an assumption here that all people in cells are going to be drug addicts, mentally ill, etc. Well, I've risked arrest at protests. Could be me. Could be any one of a number of women that I know. I certainly don't want to be guarded by a man. I mean, that would just be, I have PTSD from another situation, and I just know that that would trigger me if the whole being in jail thing hadn't already. And the other piece is that's not being addressed in Councillor Fuller's reconsideration motion is having one person in charge, one guard on duty. I've been in that position, not as a guard, but as a caregiver. And it's really easy for somebody to make something up. I've had friends whose lives have been ruined because of that. So having one guard is, I certainly wouldn't want to be in that position. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't see any questions for you, ma'am. Thank you for speaking up. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Brennan. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next speaker is Ms. Vicky Bertram.
Hi, my name is Vicky Bertram and I live in Nanaimo.
Thank you.
I found listening to this very emotional already. I didn't know exactly how to address this issue, but it's very important that we do. I've watched the segment from Monday night several times, and one thing that I clearly saw was that there was some cognitive dissonance happening. In psychology, cognitive dissonance is the mental stress or discomfort experienced by an individual who holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values at the same time, performs an action that is contrary to their beliefs, ideas, and values, or is confronted by a new information that conflicts with existing beliefs, ideas, or values. That discomfort is handled by changing one of their thoughts, changing your behavior, adding a new thought that rationalizes the inconsistency, or by trivializing the inconsistency by making it not a big deal. It is when you have a choice that you feel the discomfort. And in watching that video, I saw many times over that people were feeling this discomfort. The criminal code and the RCMP, the whole justice system, is meant to protect after the fact by meting out consequences when we are abused physically. The fact that we are offered assistance through victim services recognizes harm and trauma to our mental well-being that comes when we are raped, battered, victimized, or violated. The information the provincial government provides is quite extensive and validates the importance of the service when women and men experience trauma. Revictimization can and does occur when we are not sensitive to the needs of those who have been abused. It can and does occur when we are unaware of what someone has experienced. It can occur unintentionally, but using common sense and some critical thinking regarding what is acceptable and what is not, we know what is the right thing to do, to not expose anyone to something that will cause them harm. We should always err on the side of doing no harm, always. We do not need to be highly educated in child development to understand about children developing a level of modesty and curiosity between the ages of 3 and 5. If you have children, and many of you do, you know what that is. You don't have them bathing with other children. You don't bathe with them. You cover them up. You teach them. You talk to them about being modest and what that means, that you don't watch other people when you go to the swimming pool. That happens at the youngest age. So this is where that cognitive dissonance comes from, because we teach our children that. The Core Services Review says the use of separate guards for male and female prisoners is unique to Nanaimo and costly. The Human Rights Code says that we have a duty to accommodate, and to the point of undue hardship. And that does not mean that just because something is costly that we do away with it. We heard that gender is a part of the job description. This ability to make it part of the job description is a reasonable and bona fide response in recognizing the duty we have to protect, as well as the basic knowledge that we have a responsibility to do no harm. I share this from the Ontario's excellent human rights page because our own, sadly, is lacking such depth. Regarding setting job requirements, some requirements may be directly discriminatory and yet not violate the Human Rights Code. If the employer can show that it is a reasonable and bona fide occupational requirement, and they give an example of a health club, has a requirement that staff in a men's locker room must be men. This requirement would likely meet the test for a reasonable and bona fide requirement. We have in our jails women that we know come from walks of life where they have suffered abuse. And my own experience is that women have divulged to me things that are horrendous. I would like to know how many of you have met a woman.
Ma'am, your time is up. Any questions for the delegation? Thank you very much, ma'am. Seeing none, call a question. Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Fuller. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next delegation is Ms. Leslie Clark.
Hello. I just want to, Amy's just going to stand up and hold me up here behind. Amy, I just want to introduce Amy to you because Amy's an outreach worker with the Nanaimo Women's Centre, and she's out.
Can we have your city of residence, please?
It's in Nanaimo.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to start by thanking the Nanaimo First Nation for allowing me to present here tonight. Many of the women impacted by the decision in question use the services of the Nanaimo Women's Centre or are connected through the CAT outreach team. We see women in the same conditions often presented in cells, incapacitated by substances, underdressed, malnourished, and perhaps struggling from poor mental health and developmental disorders. Having spoken to women who have experienced detention, I can assure you that they do see female guards as a significant protective factor. Councillor Kipt mentioned that he felt that these women may have lost sight of their dignity. As someone who has worked with vulnerable women for over a decade, I can say that nothing could be further from the truth. A sense of shame that these women and girls feel can be a significant barrier to their healing. Shame is the mechanism that keeps many women quiet. It is the reason that we don't report sexual assaults, and it's the reason we may not talk about degrading experiences, even those that happen in cells. This is the difference that gendered guarding makes. We as a community are expressly telling people that their dignity and safety matters. To deny these women their dignity deepens their trauma. I also want to address the notion that reallocation of funds used for gendered guarding would be better spent at upstream programming. Marginalization is not a condition that is owned or produced by the individuals themselves, leading us to the idea that if we could identify these people and provide them with supports early enough, we can prevent their marginalization. I am the first to welcome an approach that is both able to provide prevention and intervention. For some individuals, prevention and early intervention can enhance resiliency, and it is critical to provide these measures. However, for those that are not reached in time or simply cannot withstand the crushing weight of growing up in poverty, violence, and trauma, we have a responsibility to their well-being. For many of these very young detainees, what happens in cells is an opportunity for early intervention, or at least to mitigate the trauma. Proposing that we can remove measures at one point on the continuum and load them all upstream is inadequate. We have a duty of care to our citizens, particularly those who are marginalized by systemic violence and detained against their will. Eliminating the prevalence of marginalization amongst vulnerable women means the elimination of multi-generational impacts of poverty, colonization, racism, child apprehension, trauma, sexualized violence, and misogyny. It also means a restructuring of the systems that do not acknowledge or address these issues. This is why this seems to be a step backwards for us, and why we were so proud of the city's initiative, because gendered guarding was a recognition that it's not just the vulnerable individual's responsibility to rise above, but the community's responsibility to recognize how systems impede others' healing and put them at risk. I found it ironic that this issue is being discussed at the same time that a plan was unveiled to discuss and to improve how healthcare is provided to Indigenous people. On one hand, we recognize that dignity has been far too long denied, and on the other, we undo measures, unwilling or unable to understand that these issues are one and the same. It should already be an issue that guards are not trained in mental health first aid, trauma-informed care, cultural competency, or to recognize when someone has been exposed to a date rape drug. No male guard should be left to manage the complex needs of a detained woman who is often ill. Guards are not often left alone in the direct care of detainees. However, they are there during booking. They speak to those in custody. When checking on female detainees, guards are seeing these women using the toilet. And this is not a mediated or anonymous experience. Cameras are visible, and therefore women know they're being watched, and they know when there aren't women on staff. Women in cells are known to ask that men not watch them. Sometimes male RCMP officers are the only ones available, and a woman guard is the one that can be present. I can't express more profoundly my concern that a decision is being made without truly understanding the impacts of those who are arguably the most vulnerable in our community. The reason we don't have more research or data is because we are talking about voiceless, marginalized individuals. My question is, can we develop a plan to better understand the impact and determine appropriate responses before we dismantle procedures that did actually come with a recommendation? Why haven't other communities adopted this? Once again, we're talking about marginalized individuals. How long has it taken for us just to begin to address systemic racism? How long did it take to recognize the systemic issues contributed to the Picton case? How long has it taken the government to create a forum to address missing and murdered Indigenous women? When other communities ask why Nanaimo changed its practice, will the answer be that it impacted voices of marginalized individuals who could not adequately represent themselves? I propose that we develop a mechanism to gather information from these women and their experiences. Right now, for reasons that we do not fully understand, we are seeing conditions worsen on the street. Many young women and girls are street entrenched and will probably at some point end up in cells. This is not an area where we should be figuring out how to save money. This is an evolving social issue in this community, and it needs more resources and more commitment. It is clear from the last council discussion in council that not enough is understood about the impacts of this decision. And to just save money...
Ma'am, your time is up.
Okay, and to just save money and not consider the harm is, I think, ill-considered.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pratt.
Excuse me, I just want to get the name of the other person who was standing with you.
This is Amy Shalafu.
Amy?
Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you for being brave, Amy. Thank you. Councillor Brennan, I'm sorry.
Leslie and Amy, for the report you just gave. It was incredibly well researched, and I think it highlighted issues that we had not yet considered. So I want to thank you for that. It was really good work.
Thank you. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next delegation, Mr. Terry Lee Wager.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Your city
I live
residence.
in Nanaimo.
Thank you.
I'm presenting a speech on behalf of Gail Collins, also resident of Nanaimo. Greetings to Nanaimo Council and city staff and interested citizens. Thank you for listening today to the delegations regarding the same-sex guard issue. For the third time, we must stand and speak to it. This is a topic that begs public input. To be brief, I will direct my comments to arguments against same-sex guarding as voiced by councillors and social media posts that defy logic, are impractical, and provide no solution to the plight of vulnerable women or the reasons they land in jail. Councillor Gord Fuller's argument that no other municipality provides same-sex guarding is really no argument, as Nanaimo shows compassion to its vulnerable as a city and provides them ethical care. To defy those ethics on the grounds that other communities do not is not moving forward at all. Comparison is fine when looking for great new technologies that need improvement, but have no place in how we protect our vulnerable populations, as we have been doing for almost 12 years. Are we leaders or are we followers when it comes to caring? Councillor Yoakum makes a more weighty point when he states that we want to be progressive, but unfortunately his view favors cross-guarding while suggesting that some brainstorming will be needed. And to the last point, I agree. I researched the operational procedures of cross-guarding and noted many protections for women are attached to this practice that he may not be aware of. His goal, that of saving taxpayers' money, will not happen if the real procedures attached to cross-guarding required in prisons are followed. Correctional Services of Canada requires that any male guard working in the female detainee cells is scrupulously hired, specially trained, and possesses a respectful, non-authoritative demeanor. He cannot be assigned to monitor women housed in camered cells and must allow time for female detainees to cover it before coming in view. If a female detainee is strongly anxious about a male guard monitoring at night, a female guard must fill in. The application of these precautions would make all of us feel better about cross-guarding, but alas, would save us not a dime. Any changes in guarding practice must be for the fair treatment of women and minor teens and youth that wind up in the city jail. Otherwise, how can it be called just? Jerry Hong was all business as well the night the vote came down. Before we count the savings left after backfilling for 50% of laid-off jail staff, we need to find out how serious the CUPE union leader Blaine Gurry is in his public responses we read in Nanaimo papers last week. He has some serious concerns about Nanaimo's money-saving initiative. It seems duties cannot be performed optimally under the new and difficult circumstances during long 12-hour shifts. So much so, in fact, that guards talk about the probability of having to quit. One guard has been on board for 30 years. This resistance speaks volumes about the appropriateness of these changes. Jim Kipp questioned jail manager Mike about the money that could be saved denying female detainees access to female guards, despite abuse issues, addictions, mental illness, and anxieties when placed under authoritative males. The vote was still upheld, even though Mike told Jim he didn't know what money could be saved. Many in Nanaimo wonder how low council is willing to go to sell out the right to safety and privacy of the person when women, youth, and teens are detained in city jails. Ironically, it seems not much money will be saved. Should this unpopular move have councillors see information about actual savings before voting for this? Some councillors indicated they would rather use the proceeds on measures that prevent women from going to jail. They suggested that even 2 less women a year would be worth it, meaning female cells would empty this century. Not to sound impatient, but why is this even practical, since women represent only 10% of detainees in the city jail, whereas men remain by far the largest group at 80 to 90%? There is nothing concrete in any argument against same-sex guarding that addresses addresses the pressing issues that lead to incarceration, like demographics, unstable housing, addictions, abuse, mental illness, and poverty that contribute to the detainees' numbers in jail. Thank you, Wendy Pratt, for showing your valid disappointment with the vote and promising to hold the council's feet to the fire on their promise of using the dubious savings that can be scraped from the unemployed guards into prevention when female detainees lost out on the vote. Your arguments were impeccable. Further thanks to Diane Brennan and Ian Thorpe for standing tall for the status quo.
Sir, your time is up.
Okay, may I just briefly finish? I have about 10 seconds. I'm asking Council to keep the status quo for now until viable options other than cross-guarding can be brainstormed. I am asking that you rescind the vote made on October 24th, 2016, meanwhile, so that Nanaimo remains as compassionate as we have been proud to be for the last dozen years. I am further requesting that any plans to do with the welfare of vulnerable persons seek public input before a vote is called that threatens the welfare of all struggling and helpless citizens. Consider if you really want to be the council that drops rather than enhances compassion for the vulnerable. I appreciate the chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I see no speakers, no questions for you. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Pratt. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Tim McGrath.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tim McGrath, 431 3rd, Nanaimo. I've spoken with a lot of people, put extensive time into the researching of the issue of the gender-specific guarding. Research has found that gender-specific guarding is blatant sexual discrimination. It is against the BC Human Rights Code and the Canadian Charter of Rights. It is unlawful. I hear the women's groups talk, and they claim that women need special treatment and special protection. Frankly, the women I know are very strong. That's what equality has all been about. The real problem is more vulnerable people. We heard Catherine Davis earlier, and she referred to a specific case, and if you're familiar with the case, you'll find out that they had a female guard in there, and it did no good. None. So the whole argument of having a woman there doesn't hold water. We heard about dignity. Frankly, I don't know whether any of you have ever been in jail, but nobody has dignity in jail. Sorry, that's the way it is. They're embarrassed when they're arrested. They're embarrassed when they get thrown in the police car. They're embarrassed when they have to go through central booking under police supervision, not the guards. It is the guards never search a woman. They don't search any people. That is the duty of the RCMP. They do not restrain anybody. They do not do anything like that. They never touch the person. As far as looking, everything is on video. Now, we've heard another lady say, well, stories can be made up. No, they can't. The guards don't even have access to the tapes. Okay, the recording is done into a secure cabinet. It is monitored by the RCMP upstairs. There's none of that. We've heard a number of people talking about federal laws. They've been talking about provincial laws, provincial remand centers. They're arguing about something that has no relevance here. This is a city jail, plain and simple. The real problem is about vulnerable people and abuse of power by people in authority. Abuse of power by people in authority, abused by the very people who are there to protect the citizens, is disgusting and abhorrent. We all agree with that. So it's a matter of vulnerability and abuse by people in power. That is the question. Those holding a position of authority are put there and must follow very strict procedures and adhere to the laws. If a person abuses their power, it is then, as in Kelowna, for example, when they must be met with stiff and swift punishment. And Kelowna is a perfect example. That is exactly what happened. Somebody abused their power, it was solved. We talk about the progressiveness of the city. In reality, progressive means gender-neutral washrooms. And you'll see that the school boards right across the province are all implementing it. Many of the theaters are doing it. Many of the restaurants are doing it. They go for gender-neutral washrooms. They go for gender-neutral change rooms. They go to gender-neutral dorms. That is women's equality. Not saying, back in 2005. The world has changed since 2005. We know from example that women standing guard do not prevent abuse. We know that the whole gender and sexual orientation issue is not perceived or allotted for in the procedures of gender neutral or of gender specific guarding. So the real issue facing the council, the very concept of someone in a position of power betraying that confidence of the vulnerable people, is what council must act on. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Fuller. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next speaker is Mr. Don Bonner.
Thank you. My name is Don Bonner, and I live in Nanaimo. On March 23rd, 2009, this very same issue was being debated by council, and both Councillor Bestwick and Kip were there at that time, I believe. Back then, a budding politician by the name of Gordon Fuller made a presentation requesting that council retain funding for gender-specific monitoring in the 2009 budget. About a week ago, I was sent and was told that I have a copy of his presentation. Unfortunately, I've not been able to verify this from a second source, but it's such a really good presentation, I thought maybe council would like to hear it again. So, good evening, Mayor and Council. Let's put dignity before dollars. Early in 2004, an overwhelming number of people, male and female, spoke against cross-gender guarding and the monitoring of city jail cells, and the Council of the Day listened and implemented gender-specific guarding. Now we see that in an effort to reduce taxes, we could very well take a step back and return once again to the past. The removal of funding for gender-specific guarding will have a detrimental effect on the dignity of women who find themselves incarcerated in city cells. While there is no arguing that a certain level of surveillance is necessary for safety reasons, the idea that a male guard would be allowed to monitor a camera placed directly in front of female cells with full view and zoom capability of the toilet area, for which a person has no privacy anyway, is beyond belief. Cross-gender monitoring of female inmates would pose the risk and potential for sexual harassment, misconduct, and potentially result in unnecessary psychological harm due to the vulnerability of women placed in this situation. I ask you, how many of you have female relatives, and if by some unfortunate circumstance they were to be put in cells, would want their use of the toilet, or if in an intoxicated state they chose to remove their clothing viewed by male guards? In 2004, the Council of the Day took a momentous step towards reinstating some modicum of dignity for women held in city cells by eliminating cross-gender guarding. Let us hope that this council will see the error of eliminating gender-specific guarding and not support the removal of funding for it from the budget. So like in 2009, I'm asking that council retain funding for gender-specific monitoring and that they don't try and tweak it. Just retain it as the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no questions for you, sir. Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next speaker is Mr. Blaine Gurry.
Good evening, Blaine Gurry, Nanaimo resident. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us tonight, and I don't know how much I can add to all of what you've heard already from folks. There was a few issues I wanted to touch on. One was the cost item. I tried to run this by city staff. We talked about where the numbers came from. We're firmly of the belief that the dollar figure you were presented in terms of how much you're going to save is probably not an accurate number. It seems to be in 2004 when we went to the two-guard model in our prisons or in our holding cells. We added about $90,000 to the budget at the time in order to bring that number up to 2 full-time staff members. That's what made it very difficult for us to understand how it can possibly be that you're going to save $360,000 by reducing by 4 people, when in 2004 it only took $90,000 to move it up to 2 guards all the time anyway. I've sent you guys enough information, all of council I imagine got it, and senior staff, about what our guards have to say, their statements about it. They don't believe it's possible to do this job alone down there. They think a good 75% to 85% of the time they're going to need a second guard anyway. And that the cost of doing this in terms of the loss of women's dignity, the loss of that feeling of safety down there, for not just for our guards, but also for the detainees. I don't like using the term prisoners because they have never been charged with a crime. But the loss of dignity for them, it seems like a very small number to wash all that away. I happen to agree exactly with what Gord Fuller had to say back, or Councilman Fuller had to say back in 2009. Part of the plan tonight actually was we were going to get up and go through that with you, Gord. But beyond that, I've said everything I think I can say to you guys regarding it. You know our position on it. We'd like to see this reversed. We'd like to see you go back to honoring the wishes of female members of the community and listening to their concerns. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Just one question.
Sure.
You indicated from 2004 we added 1 guard at $90,000 approximately per annum.
I'm guessing that, yeah. Though.
And we added 4 guards?
I don't know if you added 4 full-time guards at the time. I know you added $90,000 to the budget. That's what we were told anyway.
To add 1 full-time guard from...
It was probably slightly more than 1. It was probably 1.2 or in that range.
So and I don't know the answers to the question, but it just seems to me that if we doubled our 4 guards because we needed 1 to replace the one that was just going off, and we have 4 shifts it would stand to reason that we would have to add 4.
Well, at the time, I think what was happening was you had 1 guard on all the time, so you'd schedule 1 full-time guard, and then you were calling in people on quite a regular basis pretty much every shift. So that was what was happening at the time. That's why.
At the time, and now we find ourselves at...
Yeah, at the time you moved it up to 2 full-time guards all the time because it was adding, 0.25 per shift. So it was adding a few hours onto a 12-hour shift each time.
Which would stand to reason why we've ended up...
About $90,000 more. Yeah.
Each?
No, total.
Total.
I understand at the time that you added $90,000 in total to the budget in order to bring it up to 2 full-time guards.
Thank you.
Councilor Brennan.
90,000 each you're right, that would be that's per guard then. It would be the $360,000.
But having been there in 2004,
yeah.
I think that the budget included the 1 full-time guard, and then the overtime was added, which added up.
Yeah,
so,
you bet.
So in order to eliminate just overtime spending, they added $90,000, or we added $90,000 to the already expenditures on overtime. And that's what we're proposing now.
If that's the question, I'm not sure. Yeah. But I do know that we're looking at the model that they want now, or to go down to 1 guard, you're still going to have to call in anyway because of the 11 prisoners, or if there's somebody's on suicide watch, or if there's other work to do, like cleaning the cells, bringing them their food, that type of thing. They have to be monitored, so you're going to need the second body. What you're going to run into, just like we run into in transit and other places, is when you're trying to staff on a piecemeal basis, so we need a body now, you're going to find they're not available, and you're going to wind up turning to overtime. So you're going to run out of your casuals. It's not easy to find a casual for the RCMP station. It takes a long time to get vetted through the security clearance and all that other stuff. So if you lose the people you have now, you're going to have a hard time replacing those folks. And when you phone, you might not get anybody to come. And when you need that person, you're going to be paying overtime for them. So you're going to have to call in a permanent employee anyway who's already worked their 40 or their 48, and they'll be backfilling, doubling the cost of what it costs to staff. That's at least it's really hard to tell because since 2004 we've been doing this 2-guard model, right? So we haven't run any scenarios on it. But if you look back, I don't think it's gotten any less busy in the cells. And based on the anecdotal stuff and I sent it to you guys from our guards, and I did that to protect their anonymity. I don't want to talk about it in public, but if you listen to what they have to say, most of them don't actually believe it's possible to do the job anymore with one person down there.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Thanks, Blaine. From our staff, it has gone down from 5,000 to currently 3,000 per year.
I'm sorry.
It's gone down from 5,000 a year
Yeah.
to 3,000 a year. So it has gone down. Just wanted to clarify that for you.
Yeah, no, you
Great.
could be
Thank
right.
you.
The numbers, the volume may have dropped. What we're hearing from the guards down there is back in 2004, about 25% of the people that came in were suffering from mental difficulties or had been turned away from psych wards and other, where they should be, at a medical facility. Apparently, we're seeing a lot more of that these days than we did back then. I guess as we've run out of beds, places ourselves are turning into that for social services.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Gurry. I appreciate your comments, and I'm just wanted to add one piece to what you're saying around that the number hadn't gone down, and Councillor Hong is right. I think they have gone down, but there's a good reason for that, and that is that the liability is so great in bringing people into the holding cells, into the jail, that police officers are trying very hard not to bring them in whenever possible, finding alternatives, talking to them and letting them go if they feel that they're not, that nobody else is at risk. So there's other reasons why those numbers have gone down, and it isn't 10% of those that are women. It's higher than that. There are about 3,000 a year, and I believe, if my number is correct, it was either 600 or 800 women in a year. And when we went in to do the tour. So there is a huge liability around this, and nobody wants that liability. The city certainly doesn't want that liability.
Our guards are afraid of it.
Yeah. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, guys.
Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next delegation is Ms. Denise Bryce.
Hi, I'm Denise Bryce, and I live in Nanaimo. What I hear tonight is we're not doing a very good job as a society. And what alarms me is that these cells are being used as a safe haven for people that often are really vulnerable and have nowhere else to go. I don't think that was the intention in the beginning, and I would like to see that change, and maybe some of these organizations could do something about that or start advocating for more help for these people rather than in jail cells. Anyways, I'm here to be a devil's advocate, which I like to do. You may agree with me, you may not, but I think some of these concerns should be heard. It's a brave new world out there, and we need to move on and recognize that times are changing. This past summer, under the umbrella of the BC Human Rights Tribunal, more explicit language was added to sections in the BC Human Rights Code to expand upon existing protections within the definition of sex. The definition of sex under the code now includes being a man, woman, intersexed, or transgender. Our friends and much-loved family members who did not quite fit within the former descriptions will now have protections from discrimination extended to them. It is now recognized that they represent a part of our country and indeed our global community. Our society now recognizes there's much more complexity to the terms male and female. So gender-specific guarding is what I'm referring to. What is gender-specific? On July 28th, the Human Rights Code Amendment Act came into effect. Among other amendments, the terms sexual orientation and gender identity or expression were added to the employment equity provision. Sexual orientation includes being heterosexual, gay, lesbian, or bisexual. Gender identity is a person's sense of themselves as male, female, both, in between, or neither. It includes people who identify as transgender. Gender identity may be different or the same as the sex a person is assigned at birth. Gender expression is how a person presents their gender. This can include behavior and appearance, including dress, hair, makeup, body language, and voice. This can also include name and pronouns such as he, she, or they. How a person presents their gender may not necessarily reflect their gender identity. The tribunal is currently updating its fact sheets to reflect these changes. Legally, there are no simple male, female, male, female, or gender-specific identities anymore. Realistically, there never have been. How would you know from which category you are hiring? Where would you propose to place detainees who fit into these categories? And how will you determine who will watch over them? In which cell would you place a transgendered or bisexual individual? In which cell would you place a male who identifies as a female or a female who identifies as a male? Their body parts may not represent their sense of themselves. How would you know for sure what body parts they have? You won't, and it's none of your business. When hiring new guards, it's possible that they may present as male or female when being interviewed, but is there any way to know for sure? This outdated gender-specific policy is not sustainable. It is not for us to judge. Washrooms all over the globe are now being shared by everyone. Cross-gender guarding is a common practice in holding and correction facilities and has been for years. We are not setting a high bar if we reinstate a gender-specific policy that discriminates and focuses on gender issues alone. We would be living in the past. It is not okay to imply that male guards are unable to treat detainees of any sexual identity with compassion, sensitivity, or dignity. Why do we dwell on possible abuse by male guards when female guards are just as capable of committing abusive acts as their male counterparts? The world is complicated, and we need to deal with it, just like other progressive nations are doing. Rights are not gender-specific anymore. They are equal and basic human rights, and we need to start treating everyone with equal respect, no matter who they are, their origins, their color, their disabilities, or their beliefs. The term gender-specific is in itself discriminatory. The fact that this policy put the city in a position whereby they hired guards based on a specific gender, whilst having to lay them off or fire them based on seniority, as required by the collective agreement, is a very slippery slope that could most certainly be legally challenged. Excuse me. This gender-specific policy needed to be discontinued and replaced by hiring simply the best qualified individual. Some may identify as male, some female, and what real difference does it make, as long as they do the job in a professional manner and that they realize that any lapses in behavior will be met with swift consequences. There is a reason that Nanaimo has stood alone and lonely among 63 municipalities whose cell blocks are policed by the RCMP. This gender-specific guarding policy is not just expensive, outdated, and unnecessary. It is discriminatory and illegal and would most likely not survive a challenge in court. It would also become more difficult to defend as time passed.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Okay. Please wake up and smell the roses. We are all experiencing how fast our world is changing, and we have to change with it. Let us be on the right side of history on this and stand by your decision.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
don't
you.
see any questions for you, ma'am. Motion to receive the delegation, Councillor Hong, seconded by Councillor Kipp. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, we had one speaker that wasn't in the auditorium. Is Mr. Matthew O'Donnell in the auditorium? Don't see Mr. O'Donnell. Thank you very much. It's now about 7 minutes to 9. Rather than get into debate, I would like to call the recess now. And we'll be back in 10 minutes. Councillor Pratt.
Could I ask if it's possible for us to have the motion that Councillor Bestwick, or rather Councillor Fuller made, copied out for us so that we can actually have it in front of us when we're debating it? It was a very long motion, and I'm going to need the details of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Armstrong.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We're in recess for 10 minutes. We'll be back at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, staff, for getting the motions up on the screen. Can we have order in the chambers, please? Thank you. Now, the next item. The next item was to hear the actual motion. However, I see that a delegation has arrived that was on the delegations list. What is council's pleasure? To hear the delegation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. O'Donnell. You'll be the last delegation. If you can give your name and your citizen, or pardon me, your city of citizen of residency. Blah.
No problem. My name is Matthew O'Donnell. I live at 1673 Meredith Road. I'd like to apologize for being a little late. I had another speaking engagement and didn't expect the topic to be pushed to the front of the agenda, so my apologies. Basically, there's really nothing that I can say that hasn't already been said from the previous delegations. So I'd just like to very briefly just give my input as a male looking at this issue. I understand municipal government, you're looking at things from a government and a business standpoint. Dollars and cents need to matter. I definitely understand that. You have to look at it by the numbers. But one thing that we also need to look at as a community, as elected officials, people from the general community, etc., the human aspect. And it doesn't matter what I say, or quite frankly, it doesn't really matter what anyone says. If there are people in the community who feel vulnerable, who feel at risk, and if there's that liability of risk, then it needs to be heard. And you can't really put a dollar amount on that concern. And you can't really put a dollar amount on the human aspect. So once again, there's really nothing that I can say that hasn't already been said. Thanks for allowing me to speak. And just think about the human aspect and the fact that if there are people in the community who are bothered by this, as elected officials, it needs to be taken into consideration. And I think it's just as important as the financial aspect as well. So thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thank you very much, sir. I don't see any questions. Thank you very much, Councillor Kipp. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fuller, thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now on to the motion. Councillor Fuller, would you care to read the motion?
To the table? It was from the table. Lift it. Yeah. Lift it and put it back on the table.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Yes. Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Fuller, you're on.
So the motion would be to adopt the Corps Services Review final report recommendation to reduce the number of guards per shift from 2 employees to 1 employee. Number 2, direct staff to schedule a female guard on call for those shifts where a male is on duty. Direct staff to monitor and report back on the new guarding process in 12 months from the date of implementation. Direct staff to work with the RCMP to address implementation of new guarding process. And direct staff to work with the Public Safety Committee to make recommendations on a strategy to address this as part of the social wellness strategy and options for working with key community stakeholders. And so if I can, I'd just like to briefly speak to it because what I think this does is it addresses the gender specificity. So if there's a woman in cells, there will always be a woman guard. Always. So I'm seeing someone shake their head that this does not address gender specificity, but if there's a woman in cells, there will always be a woman guard. So that addresses that. And it also goes to the what's happened over since 2004, the lack of statistics that have been gathered on and the information. So for the next 12 months, we're going to be getting information given to us. And you never know, in 12 months, we may be coming back and saying, wait a minute, we should actually have 3 guards on. You never know. So that will also address that one. And yeah, so, you know, it was great listening to all the presentations that we've had. I think this addresses a lot of the concerns that were brought up in those delegations. When there are 11 people in cells, a second guard comes on. That's a fact. At this point, the RCMP recognized that as appropriate, so who am I to say it isn't? Maybe when they come back, we will see some better statistics. We will know that maybe we should lower that to 9 people and bring in the second guard. So that's why the motion's being made. And
Thank you very much. I have another speaker, Councillor Pratt, but I wanted to ask for clarification from the clerk, please. And that is, we're here tonight to reconsider 51316. Is it not that we, 51316, that's the motion we should be reconsidering? This looks like this motion has changed considerably. I'm looking for clarification, please.
Council can move forward with a new decision with this current motion on the table.
The new motion is the existing motion. Number 1 is that, and it has amendments being proposed to it. So it's amending the motion, the option that was picked whenever it was done, and it's amending it. So it's an amendment to the existing motion. And in a reconsideration, you can suggest amendments to that motion.
So the original motion was, it was moved and seconded that council adopt option 1 of the Core Services Review Nanaimo Jail Staff Reduction Report to eliminate 4 prison guard positions to achieve cost savings estimated at $360 annually. So this is an amendment to that motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you. I have a problem with this motion, and it has arisen from information that we did receive from CUPE and from people working in the jail. We did get some emails describing the conditions they work under. And I do not believe that 1 employee on a shift is enough people. And I don't think that 1 employee should be on by themselves. I think it requires 2 employees at this point in time. They not only have to do surveillance of the detainees, but they also have to clean the cells if a detainee soils the cell in any way. There's quite a few other issues as well, but we won't even go into those right now. How do you do that? How do you provide surveillance if you have to clean the cells as well? And if you have to do 15-minute checks, and if you have to do delivery of food, etc. I'm not sure how you do that, because all of a sudden you are not providing surveillance anymore. You're in a cell cleaning that cell. Yes, you are. So I don't understand that piece of it, and maybe I could get some clarification from our staff on that one alone.
Are you asking Mr. Dietrich?
I'm asking Mr. Dietrich if he could. Well, what would happen in a case like that? Say there were 3 people in the cells, and one of them threw up in the cell or did some other thing that required cleaning of the cell. How would that work?
Your Worship, what would happen, depending on how busy it is,
Mm-hmm.
if the cell block is pretty much full, then somebody was going to have to deal with that right away in case we had another prisoner. But typically, if the cell block is not full, they can move that prisoner, the RCMP can move that prisoner to another cell,
Okay.
and then it can be cleaned, or it can be left until there is time to clean it later. So unless we're just chock-a-block full, there's likely not going to be an instance where they have to clean it right away. Now, it could be a biohazard issue where they might want to, but the cell can also be sealed off. They have signage that says, it's a contaminated cell, do not use.
Mhm.
And they do that
Mhm.
occasionally.
Okay, that answers that one question.
There's a second part that I can also answer. The reason why staff is recommending that there be time to monitor the new process, having one guard as opposed to 2 guards, is so that we can gather the statistics necessary to be able to make recommendations to council. While I appreciate QP is representing those employees and has provided anecdotal information to you, I think it'd be prudent to have actual data and monitoring to see what is the impact of going from 1 guard or 2 guards to 1 guard.
So the purpose of this, I just want to be clear in my own mind that there will always be a female guard on duty.
It's drafted in a way that it honors the principle of female guarding with female detainees. So in the instances where there's a female on, you don't need a female on call, but where a man is on, a male is on, there will be a female on call. And the reason why there's a recommendation to work with the RCMP on addressing this is that there should be some guidelines and protocols in place to deal with this new paradigm and make sure that everything is in place, that when the RCMP picks up a female and has the intention of taking them back there and there's a male on guard, there's a sufficient time that the on-call female can get in.
I'm not happy with this. I will say out loud, I am not happy with this new motion. However, it does provide us with the female guards that we need in that situation. So in that respect, we at least have accomplished that. I'm assuming then that when we look at number 3, direct staff to monitor and report back on the new guarding process in 12 months from date of implementation, and direct staff to work with RCMP to address implementation of a new guarding process. I'm happy with that part of it because from what I can gather, and I do believe in anecdotal information, these are the people working there, and I was actually personally shocked by some of the things that they said in their emails, and I'm not happy about that, and I'm really hoping that a new process can be put in place because I don't think anybody's being served well down there if we're only going to have 1 guard on. I don't believe that that's going to work, but in terms of cross-gender guarding, this, I guess, accomplishes what we wanted to do. I'm still holding my thoughts as to whether or not I'm going to actually vote for this. Thank you.
I would also offer on this, once something this comes to the attention of staff that there's concerns about workplace environment and workload, we have processes to follow to investigate that, to determine what's going on, and to address it. It wasn't brought to our attention until it was sent from QP to Mayor and Council. So we can work with QP and take a look at this in any area of our organization where these types of issues and I get raised. It triggers an investigation and a dialogue with the union to investigate.
Thank you.
What they had to say. So just to follow up to that, if you don't mind, I definitely do believe that we need to look at implementing a new process here. This has brought something to light that's aside from the fact that the gender guarding, the cross-gender guarding is a huge issue, and I do not want female prisoners to be viewed by anyone other than a female guard. If this accomplishes that, and we can be guaranteed that that is the case, then I could probably be persuaded on an interim basis right now to agree to it. But I also would like, as not as part of this motion, but if I maybe can ask after, or whether I can just state it now, I would also like to know what the actual savings of something like this would be, because I also understand that there is a fear that because there, especially when there is a situation where you get a lot in the cells all at once, then you don't have time to clean up. You don't have time, especially if it's just one person, and they're all males that are in there, for instance. And then you've got to bring in cleaning staff. So we really need to look at this, all the pieces of it, and whether or not the needs of the prisoners are being met, and the needs of the guards, because I have concerns about that, in that I don't think they get enough training for what they're doing, and I think this is an extremely difficult job, and I think we really need to look at our employees as well. Yes.
I thank you for making those comments, and we've got a lot of different issues at play here as the different jobs and functions within that facility, and the police support workers are City of Nanaimo employees, and they fall under a collective agreement, but they work with and take direction from the RCMP, which is why we included something up there to make sure that should workplace issues be raised and workload issues, which are new to the table. Originally, this report was just looking at the gender guarding and whether or not that should be continued. But as we've received information from the public and delegations and additional information, now the issue of workplace and workload has been brought to the attention. So we will, as staff, go away and work on that. I know you want us to give you a magic number of dollars of savings. That's not possible at this time. As we look at, because it's a complicated scheduling process of full-times, permanent part-times, casuals, there's a lot of different iterations. We've played with a number of the different schematics. We're not guaranteeing you huge cost savings.
That's what I'm afraid of. That's what I'm afraid of.
That's also why we're going back and taking a look at it. It's not as easy as just saying, if you do this, we will only have 6 people here or 8 people there. We need to work with CUPE to look at ways that we minimize any layoffs, look at ways of being flexible from the CUPE standpoint, that the people that are there, if there's a need to have on-call in a different way, that we explore that. And that should be done under a collective agreement, looking at ways to minimize the impacts with layoffs, but also scheduling in a responsible way that meets the needs of both the employees and the people that are there.
Thank you.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I just wanted to get through Councillor Pratt's comments, and I guess through you to staff. Currently, we have 1 male, 1 female guard. So every 15 minutes, they're supposed to do a walk. So every 15 minutes, somebody isn't watching the camera. Am I correct?
Your Worship, the cameras are only there to augment what they're supposed to do physically. The cameras were never meant to replace physical checks. In fact, we stress to the guards, you must go down that hallway every 15 minutes at a random time and go and look and do a physical check of that cell block. That is the requirement. The cameras are simply there to help you at other times. And the times I've been in the cell block, I've not seen anybody staring at those cameras, quite honestly, and watching every detail of what those prisoners are doing. They're there to augment what they're supposed to do.
Great. Thank you. That's the question.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. This proposal is only marginally better than the one that we chose a couple of weeks ago, where there would be just 1 guard on. The notion that we will have a woman on call that can be contacted and brought in to the cells is really just not immediate enough. It just doesn't work. When we were told maybe an hour, I'm feeling really quite undermined by comment or the body language across the table. This is my point of view, and as a councillor, I'm entitled to say this point of view without being contradicted by body language from the other side of the table. On-call is not immediate enough.
Council, the councillor has the floor. Please allow the councillor to have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. The on-call is not immediate enough. We were told at the tour that when there was a male guard on and you needed a female to come in, that they would contact a female from the on-call list. And that could take up to an hour, they said. But there was no guarantees on that. That could take up to an hour when the RCMP officer contacted the detachment and said, I have a female that I'm bringing down to cells. Then the action would begin and they would start phoning and trying to find someone. This call-in may happen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, might happen at 4 a.m. Those are entirely different situations. As I say, we're just being entirely too optimistic about how quickly we can get a female guard down to the detachment. One guard only is just it's just not adequate for the job. I think that, I'm not sure whether it was one of the delegations or one of our staff. I think it may have been the union delegation. The 75 to 80% of the time will require 2 guards, and that's whether or not there's a woman. So 75 to 80% of the time you're going to require 2 guards. You're going to keep people on call, calling them in middle of the night. It's just not an adequate way to run the show. It just isn't. I think one of the delegations, I think it was Ms. Bertram, said, or cautioned us and asked us to always err on the side of do no harm. And this does not err on that side at all. There's nothing up here that prevents us from directing the RCMP to work with direct staff to work with the RCMP. There is nothing up here that doesn't say that we can't use the Public Safety Committee to make recommendations. There's nothing up there that doesn't say that we won't study this and report back to council so that council has some information. The information included in the core review was inadequate, and there are some who say that not only is it inadequate, but it was inaccurate. So I just think that the status quo is the only reasonable option. It's the only option that satisfies the principles that the people who addressed us tonight have asked us to abide by and to implement. I just think we are flying in the face of such a progressive move way back in 2004, confirmed in 2009, and now we have an opportunity to do that again, to make this right, to use the status quo, to ensure that from the time a woman is picked up to the time that she's released the following day or the day after, that she's going to be monitored by a female. And so I can't support this. It is just not good enough for Nanaimo. It's not good enough for the women who we bring into cells.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. This has been a really emotional and a difficult debate, and I admit that I am somewhat torn. Last week, the original motion was to maintain the status quo, and that was defeated. I subsequently made a motion for what I thought was a decent compromise position. That was option number 2, which would have maintained staffing levels. Anyway, that was defeated as well. The third vote was for option number 1, which was to adopt the Core Services Review recommendation. I voted against that, and I would still vote against it for the same reasons. I haven't changed my beliefs or my opinions or my values on this subject. Councillor Fuller's amended motion, first of all, I'm glad that we are reconsidering and having another look at this. It's a great discussion, and I think there's more than one issue involved here. But in my mind, Councillor Fuller's amended motion doesn't go far enough, and it doesn't address the staffing issue as I would like it addressed. It attempts to deal with the gender-specific guarding issue, but I don't think it does it in a good enough or efficient enough manner to satisfy me. I'm put in a position of having to accept something which is somewhat better than last week, but not really good enough, as opposed to nothing. But I'm not sure that I can accept this. I want to maintain the status quo as we have it now in terms of staffing levels and gender-specific guarding. I don't want to tweak that. I want to maintain a 2-guard system. I think the safety of guards and the people in the cells is paramount, and I think the dignity of those people in the cells is very important. I want to avoid any layoffs and job loss. And I think any cost saving that might be found through this Core Service Review recommendation is nebulous, and I don't think it's worthwhile. So for those reasons, I reluctantly will not be able to support this amended motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Me again. I agree with Councillor Thorpe. I've just been sitting here listening to Councillor Brennan and then to Councillor Thorpe and thinking this isn't good enough. It just isn't good enough. What I want to see is us maintain the program that we had. I think it's a good program. I think it's a progressive program. I think it definitely meets the needs of all of the prisoners at our jail, both male and female, but definitely guarantees the dignity and respect that is needed for vulnerable females within that system. I was speaking to a guard a week ago, and he said to me, the difference between the attitude of males going into the jail and females going into the jail is night and day. It is not the same. It is not the same in terms of their dignity. It is not the same in terms of whether they feel safe or not. And I have such a hard time with getting rid of something that is working so well and that will guarantee that these women are kept safe and that they are able to keep their dignity, and that it protects the guards as well. Because what I have come to realize is that we are asking these people to do a horrendous job with right down near the bottom of the payroll scale. And I just have a really hard time with that. So in thinking, as I'm listening to other people, I definitely believe that we should go back to the status quo. What we have is a progressive, really, really good program. We're not going to save enough money to get rid of it. We don't need to get rid of it. And we don't need to save that money to get rid of it. And I don't believe, as I said before, that this program is mutually exclusive to us having other programs that help in terms of prevention or in other ways protecting women in our community and addressing women's issues in our community. I think we should be doing both. I think we should be progressive enough to realize that this is a problem and we do need to address it. These are very vulnerable people, and I can't vote for this. I can't compromise. I really, really do feel like we need to go back to the status quo because that's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
A couple of things that were said with regards to bringing casuals in and the like. The motion says to direct staff to schedule a female guard on call for those shifts where a male is on duty. Shifts are scheduled ahead of time. Do you know ahead of time when men will be on duty only? Would your schedule not tell you that, like a week ahead of time? So giving you a lot of time to schedule a female for that shift as well?
Your Worship, absolutely. We know at least 2 weeks ahead of time because we publish a schedule 2 weeks ahead of time. And in fact, most guards know that they're on a watch system with the RCMP. They know they're assigned to a particular watch. And so we know exactly when the males and females are scheduled. What we may not know all the time is when they want to take vacation or they're sick. And so that might come up at a less of notice for us, but generally speaking, we do know when they are. Now, my understanding of number 2 would be only if there's a female prisoner at the same time. So that is a little more challenging to know when female prisoners are going to be there. Yeah, so that we can't schedule a female guard because we don't know. They would have to be called in when we know there's a female prisoner and there's no male guard.
The motion calls to schedule a female guard with the male guard in case a woman comes in. That's what the motion intends. It doesn't intend to only if a woman comes in. It's that there are 2 guards there if a male guard is on. That's the way the motion is called. The other one was the 75% to 80% time you always need second guards. I believe Mr. Gurry said he thinks. He doesn't know this because we don't do the statistics to know these things. He thinks 75% or 80% of the time. Well, I might think maybe it's 50% of the time. I don't know, and neither does Mr. Gurry. So it could be 50%, it could be 25%, it could be 90% of the time. We don't know, and that's why getting this information is extremely important if we want to do this. If we want to truly do something that other cities are going to follow, then we should be doing these statistics on it. We should be doing the reporting on it. I heard one of the delegations say that after 12 years, we should challenge other communities to do what we're doing. Well, 12 years ago, we should have challenged other communities to be doing what we're doing, not waiting 12 years and going, oh, wait a minute, they're thinking of canceling something, so maybe now we should go after the other communities. That should have been done 12 years ago. And it wasn't, which is too bad. So I think this addresses a number of the issues. 12 months down the road, we may find that, yes, we should have 2 guards on all the time. Right now, the RCMP say 11. Maybe they don't know what they're talking about either. These are the guys that search the prisoners. These are the people that are bringing them in. These are the ones that are dealing with the people with mental illness, sometimes taking them to the hospital instead of to the cells. So there's a lot we don't know. And I think it's time we found out. So that's what this motion, I hope, will do, and it addresses the gender specific. So that's why it's there. And, people have a right to vote yes or no, and that's fine with me.
Thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. Thanks to all the people that came and spoke this evening, and thanks to for bringing forward this information. I think we've all acknowledged that the data, the statistics, and the analytics that we have to form our decisions on has been, in some respects, ambiguous and not necessarily all that collated for us. And part of what I believe that this motion is to ensure that we have empirical data that we're actually making decisions on and not doing things on assumptions, and we're assuming things because we don't keep good enough records, perhaps. I heard one of our delegations indicate how many Indigenous women. Well, we don't apparently know. And I've heard that in one of the requests of ask that I made to find out information on budget, which forms a part of everything that we do. We don't have to like that it does, but it does. It's a reality. I asked how many hours that in the month of October of 2016 that we did not have a female to monitor in October. And we had 724 hours of coverage, 294 hours we did not have a female to monitor. And I understand that that's relatively consistent, if you will. And who can predict? You can't predict. I get that. I completely understand that. So in other words, 294 hours with a male and female on shift for the month of October, we didn't have a female person in our care and attention. The other thing that I want to say is that this motion was defeated. This motion was defeated, and it's been brought back with compromise that we may have been able to do with option 2 or 3 or whatever it was 2 weeks ago. We have to understand this was defeated, but it was not acted upon. So here we are bringing back an opportunity for a compromise to get more over the course of the next 12 months, to put a system in place that allows us to have facts and data and information that may allow us to make other and better decisions than we made 2 weeks ago. And we make it perfectly clear inside this motion. And the deal breaker, I think, we are here to talk about gender-specific guarding, not training. If we need to train our employees better, then I really look forward to our union coming forward and saying, we need better standards of training. Okay, that's another topic. If we need better standards of conditions for our employees, then bring that forward. Please. That's not what we're discussing. We're discussing gender-specific guarding. This motion will ensure that there is gender-specific guarding encapsulated in this compromise. And it behooves me how we're only accepting of the way that it was, not the way that it could be, because 2 weeks ago, the compromise option, if you will, I can't remember which one it was, 2 or whatever, was people were willing to accept that then as a compromise, but they're not willing to accept this, which I think, personally, frankly, my own opinion, I understand you don't have to agree with me, is better than that one. So I don't quite understand how this motion is not acceptable. So we're going to throw what I've heard, throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Just be careful, I think, because if there is another motion to follow this one, be careful. This one, to me, brings the opportunity for everybody to review, revisit, work with, make it better, come back in 9 to 12 months, 6 to 12 months with information that we can actually nail down. And if anybody abuses their privilege of authority and power in the positions that they've been hired to do, then eliminate the person immediately, period. I can't imagine that we have to even think about the stuff that has happened in the past in our society today. And if we do, that's a bigger problem on how we screen our employees. That's a bigger problem on how we do what we do to ensure that we're hiring the best people, male or female, to observe males or females. There's a fundamental flaw with how we do what we do in our hirings. So I'm going to support this motion because I want to see how we make out. And it's better than, it's sure as hell better than what you came here, than when you came here, when you left 2 weeks ago Monday. So I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 4 more speakers. Ms. Samurai, was there a point of clarification?
Yes, there definitely was, Your Worship. Thank you. Last week, or the week before, when this issue came up as a late item to have a delegation come forward to speak to gender guarding, I shared something very personal with council about this issue and the dialogue within Canada about violence against women and violence against Indigenous women. So this is a profoundly important issue to me as your employee, as a citizen of this community, and as a woman who has family and friends and who is part of those statistics against violence against women. So I understand how passionate debate can be about this. But there's something that I find deeply troubling is in the treatment of staff by council in an open meeting. You can be passionate about this argument, but to lash out in a public meeting and make reference and speak to a staff member isn't appropriate. What you can do to me is what you can do to my staff around me and to other people. And we need to take this up to a level of more civility and more respect in this chamber when we're at this table. And I think it's very unfortunate that that happened. And I have to rely on you, Your Worship, as the chair, to keep that decorum and to make sure that staff are here supporting you, listening to very tough personal stories about abuse and about the horrible things that have happened to these people. People have shared a great deal with us this evening. So, I'm sorry.
Carry on, Ms. Samurai.
I thought she was talking to me. So, it's difficult for all of us here. And when is the point? Because my responsibility is to staff. So I hope going forward something like that doesn't happen again to me or to anybody at this table. My staff have told me a few times I needed to speak out sooner when people have come up and started to attack staff. So I'm really going to try to follow that. That's the one point I wanted to make. The additional information that I wanted to share at that time had to deal with how the city has approached the on-call issue. We do it in the fire and emergency services, public works, parks and rec, and police services. So having people on call and designated is a practice that we do have within the city. It is something that is achievable within reasonable time frames, and is some of the reasons why we put the different types of recommendations there, so that if you went with an on-call person when a male guard is on shift, that a reasonable amount of time with the cooperation of the RCMP and guidelines that this is something that is doable.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Sorry to keep coming back, but every time somebody says something, I think of something new. Just in response to the on-call, they do it already. They are using on-call, and they have 2 people on, and they're using on-call. So I have a hard time going back to 1 employee and an on-call. So that's one piece. somebody said, why is this not acceptable? It's not acceptable because the reason we are doing this, the reason we stopped this program is money. Pure and simple, it was to save money. That's what it was about the last time we debated it. And to try and change it into something different than that now is a bit false, in my opinion, because I think this program needs to stay the way it is. Now, for others to say, be careful what you ask for, that kind of makes me wonder what that statement means. If I don't vote for this, I'll get nothing? Is that what it means? What does that mean? What I want is for this program to stay in place as it is, and then to look at new ways of making it better. But I want this program to stay in place, and I'm not voting for a compromise.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. We talked about progress. I support this on the basis that what Councillor Fuller said. 12 years ago, we called it progress. We didn't act on it. I hope people here are paying attention. That when we say that we're going to get stats, we're going to derive real information that we'll share with the public, that they can take to other municipalities, other organizations that need this information, that they can use to get this program to the best effective possible way possible. So we're doing something, and I'm proud of we're doing this. I love stats. I love information. I can tell you, we've budgeted $861,000 as is. That's the number, $861,000. Come to me next year. I'll give you what that number is going to be. Take that number to other municipalities. Champion this. Tell them what they can do with the numbers that we've done with this program. That's progress. If you want to make change, do it. We'll give you the tools. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. We tried. That's progress. If we fail, sorry, it's a year, we'll go back. If we make progress, that's great. You guys can make the progress, and everybody can try to follow that. I think that this is a good system. Everybody does on call. This works. We can have the best of both worlds. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
No, sorry.
Okay. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you very much. I've kind of listened tonight, and I'm glad we heard from some people. 2009, I voted for this. At the same time, I was pushing for a core review, and that was my main purpose. I had no information, no statistics, and I wanted a core review. And I wanted it because I know for time there has been no statistics, no information kept. What I heard tonight, and I honestly have gone through stuff unbelievable, societal context, legal context, police custody and pretrial detention, transit, inadequate safeguards and assessment and admission, the nature and scope of medical examinations, not separating male and female prisoners, supervision by male and mixed gender staffing, searching policies and practices, solidarity, confinement, disciplinary segregation, inappropriate and unjustified use of restraints, inadequate provision of gender-specific hygiene, sexual and reproductive health care, inadequate provision of family contact, inappropriate decisions by separate dependent children or separating dependent children. I've read tons of stuff on this. Nothing I've heard from the people has really been factual. I've heard 70 or 80%, just a guesstimate. I hear, well, it used to be 25% of the people, but now it's more like 40. Well, we had 5,700 people before. 25% of that is 25%. But when you get down to 2,500, those same mentally ill people in our town that we've built housing for, that we've fought for homeless shelters, for wet housing, and we fought for that for decades now. Built 100 units around town that we've rented or with our social services, the provincial mandate for healthcare and that. So our RCMP budget's $22 million, and we're fighting over this. And when I hear bona fide, when I look at the 1996 Chapter 210 on hiring, I don't know how we made that then, but I do think I know how. This building was on the bargaining blocks in 2004, and all sorts of jobs were coming up. This was a sell to keep this non-union, and I'm digging up information on that. Thank you, Mr. Barry. For me, we're going to do, this is a real compromise. We'd cancel it before. This is trying to get statistical information instead of, like, I'm a heartless guy. I'm absolutely heartless. I think from my brain. I don't bet from my heart. I bet from my brain. And I haven't heard a lot of things. And what I have heard is some horrible stories about how people have been treated. And if our jail is treating people like that, and we did have our RCMP go through something in this community that we're paying the price for, no one ever said anything about that. Hasn't even come to a topic now. So for me, this is a compromise, a good one, excuse me. No, we get as long as we want. We get as long as we want, long as he'll let me talk. No order to this. We cannot discriminate in employment. We cannot advertise illegally. We need to take care of our mentally ill. We need to take care of those with addiction problems. I spent a night in jail with a CUPE president once, a long time ago. Wasn't very dignified. Was stupid. We blamed each other. We were drunken idiots. I didn't come out of there very dignified. Not going to court wasn't very dignified. We paid a fine and we were out of there. I've had a son with mental illness who's been in jail. He'd been dragged into jail. He felt safe in there. He actually told the cops he was going to do something so he could go to jail because the bloody psych ward kicked him out. So sitting here for 4 union jobs and fighting over this and tearing the hearts out of everybody, and just because someone believes something, when I look at this job description in here that the union sent me, and it was anecdotal stuff added to it and that, it wasn't a very good report in itself, and that was from 2004 when we were doing a reevaluation of all our jobs. So for me, this is a compromise. I'm willing to change my mind to vote for this. But it's really frustrating when we get attacked. When in 2009 I voted for something because now I want the change. And now, how long did we fight this core review? We spent millions. We found out we can save millions in places. And we put this in front of us first. It's like we've been trapped into a situation to make us look bad again. And then to bring it back. And to have people show up at a meeting that they weren't even on. It's like, it's lobbying. It's just, to me, it's very much unethical behavior. And facial expressions across the table right now. Is that what you're saying?
So make your point, please.
Well, my point is the same thing here. This is, I got caught in a leader cast thing. And I ain't getting caught again. This is unconstitutional hiring. You can't say female only. It's not bona fide when 1 in 63 has it. That's not bona fide. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
I'm quite glad we did this tonight. We did allow people to come and speak to it. We've got a motion on the floor right now. This is a question to staff. Our clerk, I believe, through the mayor. If this motion is defeated, the previous motion stands, does it not?
Yeah. Correct.
Thank you. I know, and that wasn't why I made the motion. I noticed that one council member isn't here, and he's not on the phone, unfortunately. So this is a reality, sadly, that if this motion is defeated, the previous motion stands. This is it. This is the chance. So, I hate it. When I noticed he was gone, that came to my mind. I don't like it being this way. But unfortunately, that's the way our government works. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I think we really need to call the question.
Councillor Pratt.
Well, I think we've just been told that we're between a rock and a hard place, and that's not a nice place to be. And I just want clarification on that because this is a new motion. We are not voting on the old motion. Is that not correct?
It's acceptable to move forward on reconsideration with a new decision. It's reconsidering the matter.
So if this were not to pass, then we could make a different motion?
If this motion that we have before us is defeated, then we're back to the other motion, and then you get into time limits of when you can reconsider a matter again. It's already being reconsidered right now, and it's 6 months, unless there's a 2/3 vote of all of council to reconsider it sooner.
Okay, well, I came here tonight to reconsider the motion of of the 3rd. That's what I came here for. So I wish to speak on this particular item. I want to thank council, all of council. The majority of council took time out of their day and were very thoughtful and considerate when they went on the tour. Thank you for all coming. And they asked good questions, and they explored every nook and cranny that they were given an opportunity to look at. They were very engaged that day. One of the things that I learned that day was the efforts and the lengths that our staff, both our CMP and our civilian staff, go to ensure the dignity of the people that are incarcerated. While their liberty is removed, their dignity is not. Right down to things like ensuring that the person, when they leave, they have clothes. Right down to making sure they have socks. That's the level that our people go through to ensure the dignity. We're a leader in many areas. The fact that we're unique doesn't faze me at all. When, in the time I've been on council, we've received at least a dozen awards for different initiatives within this city. The reason we won that was because we were unique. We were the best. Those dozen or so times. One of the things that I hear from people across the province, particularly on social issues, is that Nanaimo has a very large social conscience. And the amount of initiatives that we have in Nanaimo, places like Kamloops look to us and they say, we can't believe that you led the way there. We're going to adopt that in our community because we have a strong social conscience. We are one of the most giving communities when it comes to helping our fellow citizens. I looked at the physical layout of the facility there. I don't know whether that layout is exactly the same or different, or I mean, I was a little bit intimidated at the fact that you go down into the bowels of the building. I don't know what the other layouts of the other police stations are, whether they're on the same level or how quickly RCMP upstairs can respond if there's something going on down there that needs their assistance. I don't know. I think that should be considered. I think that I've been in this situation before where people have had to work alone, and the consideration that WorkSafe requires, and the evaluation that needs to be done with respect to that. I gave a lot of credit and continue to give a lot of credit to the people that did the core review. They were very, very competent people. They are municipal experts that have, decades of experience, and I hold them in the highest regard. I'm not so certain that they peeled back enough layers of every onion, of every one of the items that they looked at. One of the things that I heard Councillor Fuller say that I thought was that really hit home was number 2, direct staff to schedule a female guard on call for those shifts where a male is on duty. So if there's a male, I've read that to say, if there is a male on duty, that we must schedule a female to also be on duty. If, however, there's a female on duty, they won't have a partner. They're alone. I don't believe that that's proper and right with respect to the safety of our workers. And I can't go there. On call, I've been in a situation in my life where I spent years honing my craft. I went and got certification so that I was certified to do the job. And then I went to a company where 3 of us were hired and had to be on call every single day of the year to share 2,400 hours worth of annual work. How was I supposed to feed my family on a potential for 800 hours worth of work? It's impossible, particularly if, and I'm not arguing with it and I'm not disagreeing with it, particularly if the people that are being called to duty are done so on a seniority basis. So if there's 2,000 hours worth of work, the person who gets the most calls is the person at the top, unless they're already working or not available for other reasons. Then the next set of work goes out to the next person. They get a lot less. Then the third person gets virtually none. But they have to be on call 365 days a year. I can tell you right now, you're not going to get people that are going to stay in that environment. They just won't happen. They cannot earn a decent income that way. So I just believe that this process is, there's all kinds of bandages put on it. But I have to say, I came here tonight to vote on reconsideration of what we voted on the other day. Thank you. Mr. Dietrich.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to comment on the on-call. We would be bringing in a female guard on the on-call list. That's what we would be making sure that on-call list has an adequate number of female guards on that list at all times to make sure that we can get a female when we need one. I think we do, as Councillor Pratt pointed out earlier, we do have an on-call list, and we can expand that list to make sure that we have people when we need them.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll call the question. And when you put up your hand, keep your hand up so that it can be recorded. All those in favor? All those opposed? Show that Councillor Brennan, Mayor McKay, Councillor Thorpe, and Councillor Pratt are opposed. Motion fails.
Move the key date calendar.
Okay, item 7A, key date calendar. The motion that Council adopt the 2017 key date calendar. It's been moved and seconded. I see no speakers. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 2017 acting mayor's schedule.
Move the acting mayor's schedule for 2017.
Moved by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, property maintenance bylaw number 1990, number 3704. And the purpose is to obtain council authorization to enforce the City of Nanaimo property maintenance bylaw number 1990, number 3704. It is request that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to property maintenance for the properties listed below. The first one is 1068 Palomino Place. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to 1068 Palomino Place? 690 Drake Street. Is there anyone wishing to speak to 690 Drake Street? 528 4th Street. Anyone wishing to speak to 528 4th Street? 388 Pine Street. Is there anyone wishing to speak to 388 Pine Street? And for the list of the addresses that I've listed, is there anyone that wishes to speak to any of them for the second time? And for the third and final time?
I would so move that council pursuant to property maintenance bylaw 3704 direct the owners of the following properties to remove the materials. And that would be the properties as mentioned. listed below from the premises within 14 days, or the work will be done by the city or its designate at the owner's cost.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Corporate services, none. Under the next item, 919, Community Services Development Permit Number DP 1011 at 3394 Stevenson Point Road. There's a motion on page 22. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hong. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, development permit number DP 1014 at 1019 Vancouver Avenue. The purpose for Council's consideration of a development permit application to vary the watercourse setback in order to construct a single residential dwelling on the existing lot at 1019 Vancouver Avenue, and we have 3 delegations listed. And they are. Before we get into that, can I ask the clerk why the addendum note? Just that they exist? And are they speaking as one delegation?
I believe that they are speaking as one delegation, but it's listed as an addendum because they put in the request after the deadline.
So they would have a reduced time after the deadline?
Yes, 5 minutes.
So they will have 5 minutes between the two of them. The other two would continue to have 10.
Correct.
Thank you. So the first delegation is Ms. Nancy Mitchell. If we can have your name and community of residence, please. You'll be given 10 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Mitchell. I live at 225 Cypress, which is a half a block away from 1019 Vancouver Avenue. And trust me, I won't be 10 minutes. I know that the day is getting quite long. I'm here in front of you again, usually to talk about the Newcastle-Brechin neighborhood plan and how it affects this particular application at 1019 Vancouver Avenue. I think as much as we'd like to see in the community lots of infill happening, that's the appropriate thing to do. In this particular case, looking for a 10.47 meter variance is something that we can't support on St. George Ravine. And in fact, Council didn't support the same application a year ago, and it's now before you again. I just wanted to make 2 points. In this neighborhood plan, there's an implementation strategy that talks about, in the short term, having a study to do some water quality testing to restore the aquatic health as necessary in the St. George Ravine. This is in the short-term implementation section of the neighborhood plan. The short-term implementation section is supposed to take place within 5 years of the plan being adopted. We're now into our 5th year. The plan was adopted in 2011. And the only thing that we have so far with respect to the St. George Ravine is we're now one of the 12 off-leash dog parks in the city of Nanaimo. And that's all that's happened in this ravine, in spite of what's in this neighborhood plan in terms of specific implementation strategies, as well as general discussions about protecting the environment and trying to enliven the environment for the community. The second point that I was going to make is that when is a variance not a variance? And in this particular case, we're looking at 10.47 meters in the way of a variance. The previous application that you just approved was only 1.4 meters. That's a variance. That's a minor relief from the zoning bylaw. A 10.47 meter variance is not a minor relief from the zoning bylaw. What I'd suggest, because we do want to encourage development, is that we actually undertake that study that's in the neighborhood plan. We find out what St. George Ravine is all about. We look at what's there in terms of the environment, in terms of the wildlife, in terms of how it can be protected, and set for that particular ravine whatever kind of setbacks are appropriate for that ravine. And they may, in fact, allow the development to proceed. Maybe they won't be able to allow the development to proceed. But I think we have to know as a community how the bylaw affects that ravine before we can actually approve a house on the edge of the bank that in fact is totally within the setback area. So I'd ask that you just uphold your decision of a year ago not to improve this particular setback, and that we proceed to do a study that's recalled for in our neighborhood plan. It's unfortunate. That's something that could have been done in the last year, but I don't think that we have an environmental planner anymore on staff. So that was something that could have actually probably been done in the last year. When the applicant came in, we would be armed with that information to know exactly where would be the most appropriate place to put development on that site. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Brennan and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is Mr. Michael Harrison.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council. My name is Michael Harrison. Excuse me. I'm the chairman of the Brecken Hill Community Association, and I live in Brecken Hill, which is in Nanaimo. Nancy and I probably should have compared notes a little bit before, because you're going to hear some of the same stuff, but I've got some original information here. This request for a variance to build a house intruding 10.47 meters into the 15-meter watercourse leaf strip or setback was first presented to Council in January of this year and rejected by Council. The applicant has returned with another request for a variance, but the housing site has not been set back 1 centimeter from the original proposed location. The applicant has received an opinion from a qualified environmental professional that because, in the professional's opinion, there is relatively low wildlife habitat in St. George Creek and that the watercourse setback restrictions do not apply. This is not correct. Ask the neighbors. There are deer, raccoons, otters, frogs, and many varieties of bird life in the watercourse area. St. George Creek is identified in zoning bylaw 4500, Schedule C, which is the maps, and that these regulations do apply. And the regulations are 6.3.1.1, a watercourse leaf strip shall be a perpendicular line inland 15 meters from the wetland boundary, and at 6.3.2, no building, structure, road, parking lot, driveway, or other impermeable surface shall be located in the leaf strip. The definition of a leaf strip or riparian area in the OCP glossary is where both fish and non-fish bearing habitat exists. The riparian areas are recognized as stream-side protection and enhancement areas. St. George Ravine Creek, or the ravine, is identified in the OCP as an area for restoration. To quote Parks and Recreation Environmental Planner Rob Lawrence, our watercourses are part of what makes Nanaimo so special. The city is working to do a better job of protecting our natural assets. We, the Brecken Hill Community Association, urge you once again to reject this variance application to build a house in the watercourse setback area. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions, sir.
No questions?
No, thank you very much.
I'm going to leave now.
Move receipt of the delegation. Is there a seconder?
Yes.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. See no speakers. Questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the next one is Ms. Barbara Reed and Mr. Keith Dice, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
I'd just like to make one point. We made our application on Wednesday, and we were told Friday would be a late application. I received a response Wednesday saying that we were on the schedule. I phoned them on Friday. They said, well, no, we put it on an addenda for some reason, but don't worry about it. You're still on. But I have paperwork showing that we made that application on Wednesday and that when we received confirmation Wednesday that we were on for today.
Excuse me, my apologies. You can have 10 minutes for speaking.
Thank you.
All right, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. For the record, my name is Barbara Reed, and I live in the city of Nanaimo. I've assisted Mr. Dice in preparing submissions. I've also got these submissions in written format. Would it be useful to council for me to circulate these as I take you through them?
Just pass them to the clerk if you would.
And essentially, I think that both of the delegations preceding us have indicated that this is a bit of a Groundhog's Day. And I'm in a position perhaps to confirm that indeed this is a very similar application to one which the council did consider earlier this year in January. At that time, Mr. Dice prepared and provided to the council a report by Stephen Toth, who is a qualified environmental P. I can't remember what the P stands for, but professional, thank you very much, which really dealt to the heart of the concerns that are essentially raised by both of the delegations who have spoken in opposition to Mr. Dice's application. Those pertain essentially to the nature and character of the St. George's Waterway and watercourse, which has been described as potentially an aquatic bearing watercourse. Mr. Toth indicated in the original report in support of Mr. Dice's application, and again by way of letter dated, I think, October the 3rd, 2016, St. George's Waterway is not capable of bearing any aquatic life whatsoever and never will be. There's never going to be an opportunity to repopulate this waterway. There never has been any fish in the waterway. So in terms of the crux of the concerns which are raised by both the delegations, and you'll find these on the second page of the written submissions under environmental impact. If I can ask the councillors to have a look at that. There's very little environmental impact that could be had by constructing anything anywhere near the waterway, and you can rely on Mr. Toth's opinion on that. In addition to that, I believe it was council's own environmental experts which fully supported Mr. Toth's opinion. Now, if you look at the nature of the application itself, there is one building envelope on this site. There's very little room to move the house anywhere else because there is...
Can I trouble you to move closer to the microphone, please? We're having trouble hearing with all the commotion out there.
There is only one building envelope on the site, which is located at 1019 Vancouver Avenue. There's no opportunity to resituate the house whatsoever. There's been a comment made, is that too close to the microphone?
No, that's good.
There's been a comment made about the excessive variance. Well, Mr. Dice has secured plans that allow for the smallest residential home that could possibly be built on this site, and that's the minimum incursion into the variance that he could commission. If the council is unable to see its way clear to granting this particular permit, then essentially the land at 1019 Vancouver Avenue is going to be sterilized completely. There will be no ability whatsoever to build anything on that site. There was previously a concern mooted about the potential for granting the application in front of council today to set a precedent. Mr. Dice has taken the opportunity since he last made this very similar application in January of this year to make inquiries. There are very few properties in the entire city of Nanaimo that would similarly potentially be sterilized if council declined to grant a development permit application. So in other words, there's very little prospect that if council granted this particular development permit application, it would set any precedents for similar incursions into the waterways. Previously, there was also a concern raised by the Brecken Hill Association about the potential, about the prospect the council might intend at some point to build a walking trail along the ravine. Mr. Dice has made inquiries about whether or not council actually does intend to build a walking trail along the ravine, and apparently that isn't the case. I think that those are the gravamen of the submissions that we've prepared. I'll leave it to Mr. Dice to raise anything that I haven't covered.
And I guess if the society would be okay with the walking trail through the ravine, where you would take about 150 meters cutting straight through the ravine. It doesn't, 2.5 meters wide, and I think that would affect the wildlife much more than what we're talking about here. My family, we've lived along that ravine for 25 years, 180 feet of it. We've lived right along that strip. And I can tell you now that we haven't gone in there and cut down a tree. We haven't had any reason to go in. And that, if we build this house, it'll be 22 feet back from the top of the ravine. And I know that the deer are going to walk through that ravine and eat our garden just like they do everywhere else in the city. Raccoons are going to come in and try to kill the fish. So we're not really doing anything here. We're not going into the ravine. We're in no way affecting anything within that ravine. And I think Sharon and myself have been pretty good stewards in that regard. And we're no different than the Brecken Society. We want to see that stay green. We want to see it as a beautiful place. I live there. I love it. There's no way we're going to do anything to harm it. And we're far enough away from that. We're from here to that wall with the house from the top of the ravine. And we've also been scheduled to put in a buffer of trees by Toth and Associates and at city's request. So to think we're doing something here to harm that, I really don't see the rationale behind that. Anybody has any? And also, it's pretty hard to build a house much smaller than 800 square feet and still have all the amenities you expect to find in a home. So, if there's any questions, I'm here.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions for you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, also, I'd like to say we're paying $1,200 a year on taxes for a lot that all I can do is mow. Expensive lawn.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Motion to receive the delegation, please. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right, there is a staff recommendation on page 41. Move the recommendation by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Thorpe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did visit this property. I know other councillors have as well. And at first I was concerned about the extent of the setback, but having looked at it and the unique shape of this property, I'm convinced within myself that, as it states in the staff report, there will not be a negative ecological impact. I don't think that the riparian area is going to be affected by the footprint of this house. It's a very small piece of land, very small opportunity for a house to be situated on it, and the ravine is so steep and wild that I just don't see the building having a negative impact. So I'm quite comfortable with the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you very much. My question is for staff. Mr. Lindsay, on page 53, Toth and Associates indicates that to be considered an RAR, accessible watercourse or water feature must either provide fish habitat or be connected to a downstream freshwater fish-bearing water, et cetera, et cetera. And the provincial riparian areas regulation will not apply to the development of this property. Can you confirm or deny any of that information as written?
I can confirm what the professional has put in their report. There's a barrier at the bottom of the creek which would prohibit the ability for specifically salmon to migrate up this creek, and because it empties directly into the ocean and not another freshwater body, it would consider to be exempt from the riparian area regulations. That does not, I want to be clear though, that does not exempt it from our development permit area, environmental development permit area, and the requirement for development permit when you develop on these lands.
And just a second question, if I may. From the top of the bank to the bottom of the ravine. And then from the top of the bank to the property line now is 5 meters, so approximately 16 and a half, 17 feet.
Thank you, Your Worship. If we refer to page 57 in your agenda, there's a good image that kind of helps with this discussion. If we can pull it up on the overhead, thank you. Which I think it shows, helps me respond to Councillor Bestwick's question. So our bylaw is the area in yellow. I realize it's difficult to see on this air photo, but the setback we measure is from the top of the bank under our bylaw. And the point I guess I'd make here is that the actual creek is at the bottom of the ravine. So at the end of the day, the measurement from the creek to the home would be over 20 meters in distance.
Thank you.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I do support this application. I think we've asked the applicant to do everything possible, and I think they've done it. So I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further speakers. I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, rezoning application number RA349 at 3425 Uplands Drive. Housing agreement. The purpose is for council's consideration a housing agreement for a 30-unit affordable rental housing development at 3425 Uplands Drive. There's a staff recommendation on page 59. Okay, so moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Fuller, can you read the bylaw, please?
This one here. That housing agreement bylaw 2016 number 7233 RA 349 to enter into an agreement on behalf of the City of Nanaimo which sets out the terms and conditions of the occupancy of the housing units identified in the agreement pass first reading.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Seeing no questions, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That housing agreement bylaw 2016 number 7233 pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. See no questions or debate. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that housing agreement bylaw 2016 number 7233 pass third reading.
Moved by Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. See no speakers. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Next item is number E. D has been removed. Number E, bylaw contravention notice. Construction started without a building permit at 1241 Woodland Street. And the purpose is for council to obtain council authorization to proceed with the registration of a bylaw contravention notice on the property title of 1241 Woodland Street. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the bylaw conservation notice for 1241 Woodland Street. Is there anyone wishing to speak to 1241 Woodland Street? For the second time? And for the third and final time? Seeing none, Councillor Bestwick.
I'd move staff recommendation that council direct the corporate officer to file a bylaw convention notice under section 57 of the community charter for the property located at 1241 Woodlands Street for construction started without a building permit in contravention of building bylaw 2016 number 7224.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item. Bylaw contravention notices, secondary suites. The purpose is to obtain council authorization to proceed with the registration of a bylaw contravention notice on the property title or the properties listed within this report. And it's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the bylaw contravention notice for the properties listed. And the first one is 3239 Crystal Place. Is there anyone wishing to speak to 3239 Crystal Place? Number 2, 360 St. George Street. Is there anyone wishing to speak to 360 St. George Street? For the second time, anyone wishing to speak to either one of those addresses? And for the third and final time? Seeing none, there's a staff recommendation on page 72. Councillor Beswick.
So move that council direct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice at the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 57 of the Community Charter for the properties as identified.
Was one of them pulled? Number 9, or not, Emery Way, was that pulled? Oh, so there's only 2 on there. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Well, pardon me, there was a second. Any other discussion? Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next item, unauthorized suites at 9 Acacia Avenue and 339 View Street and 106 Wakesaya Avenue. It's requested the council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the unauthorized suites for number 9 Acacia Avenue, 339 View Street, and 106 Wakesaya Avenue. Is there anyone present wishing to speak to those addresses? Ma'am, please. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Your name and city of origin, or city of residence, please.
My name's Karina, and I'm live in Nanaimo.
Do you have a last name, Karina?
Karina Much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I am the owner of 339 View Street. And this has been an ongoing thing about the so-called suite that is in my home. And I purchased my home in 2013 as a single-family dwelling, as a 5-bedroom single-family dwelling. There is no suite in my basement. There may be some amenities that would make it appear to be a suite, and whomever owned the house prior to me may have rented it as a suite, but there is no suite in my basement. And I would like to remove that somehow. And I would like direction as to how to make that go away, because I'm tired of this process. I've been dealing with this for 2.5 years.
Thank you.
I live in my entire house.
Thank you. If we can ask staff to answer the question, is there anything noted on title on this property? Mr. Lindsay?
Thank you, Your Worship. This suite, has followed our normal suite process, so there'd be a notice registered on the title. But at this point, because there's been no activity to either confirm the suite's been removed or a building permit to authorize it, we're here this evening with a removal order. If council approved the removal order tonight, I heard a question about what were the options for removal. If council approved it, then the owner would have 30 days to bring the building into compliance, and that would include removing the secondary suite.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you.
Do you have questions? Does anybody have, council have questions for the delegation?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
Thank you. So what is, just for my curiosity, what is in your suite right now, technically?
So my basement consists of what might be considered as a bedroom, but it's more like an office, a rec room, a furnace room, an incomplete kitchen, and a laundry room, which is the only laundry room in the entire house. There is a door at the bottom of the stairs, which most people have doors to their basements. Most people close their basement doors, but it's not locked. There's no separate entrance keyed in a different way. The same key opens the front door that opens the back door. So there's no stove. There is electrical, but I don't know who put that in there, and I've never used it. And for the entire duration that I have owned and lived in this house, there's never been a stove. I have a letter dated back to 2014, July 18th, that said, a secondary suite is defined as a space in your home that is separate from the main dwelling by a door or a wall assembly, creating a separate living space. This area would contain at least a 3-piece bathroom, a kitchen with cooking facilities, a sleeping area, and a separate entrance. The removal of one of these defined amenities would deem the suite removed. There is no stove. There never has been a stove in the entire time I have lived in that basement, in my entire house. It's not a suite,
So, but there is the plug for a stove.
I suppose.
So
I've
I
never
guess
plugged
the
the stove
easy-
into it, so I would assume that's what it's for, but it could be for a dryer for all I know.
So I think when staff come with us 30 days, when they come to, do they come to inspect again? Then if that wire is gone, it's deemed not a suite.
Remove a plug, done.
Wire.
Is that all I have to do?
Actual wire. It's the wire.
I think you'd find that that the inspector will require that you remove the wire and the plug and the
Okay.
wire all the way back to the circuit breaker box.
Okay, and with that being done, would that eliminate everything else? Okay.
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to really get into the specifics. I don't know exactly what's in the kitchen facility, but I think it's important to note that the bylaw describes it as simply a kitchen facility, the ability for cooking. It doesn't say that a stove has to be there. So generally, if we go in and there's full upper and lower cabinets and sinks, and there's opportunity to have a toaster oven, I mean, that is a cooking facility. So although the removal of the wiring for the oven would be a key component, it may not be the only thing that we would be looking at. It really depends on what we have.
Thank you. Councillor Hong, have you finished? Great, thank you. Now, Councillor Fuller and Pratt, do you have questions for the delegation?
One for the delegation and probably one or two for staff.
Go ahead.
Do you have a 3-piece bathroom down there?
Yeah,
Okay, thanks. I didn't hear you mention it, so
that's okay. The
handy.
upstairs does not. It has a shower, no tub.
Oh, so that's your only full bathroom?
It is my only full bathroom. There's a shower upstairs, but no tub.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And this through to staff. Did I hear you mention that if there was the ability to put a toaster oven in there, that would be a kitchen? I'm pretty sure
Your Worship, I think that's what I was trying to say. There's an example where we may find a suite that meets all the definition of a suite, but there doesn't happen to be a full-size heavy wired oven in place, but there is a full ability for a cooking facility, including cabinets and a sink and counter plugs in order to put things like a toaster oven or other hot plates or other ways of preparing food. I'm just trying to make the distinction that the simple removal of an oven may not be the only thing that was required.
Well, no, and I get that, and I get the 220 electrical stuff, but the fact is I could take a toaster oven down in my basement and live down there, just going upstairs to use the bathroom. We now have induction cooktops, which have become quite popular, convection microwave ovens. All of those things could be utilized to make a kitchen without a 220 electrical. So how do you determine a kitchen is a kitchen if anything can be a kitchen? Any laundry room in the basement could be a kitchen if it's got plugs. Plus, it's also got the 220 for the dryer. So, yeah, and this is one of the reasons I'm bringing forward that motion later. So, yeah, we really need to look at this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pratt.
I don't have a question for the delegation. Thank you. How long? Well, maybe I do. How long have you been in the house?
I moved in November 2013.
Okay, so you've been there 3 years,
Yes.
and no one else. Do you have a family?
I have a daughter who's 20. She lives with me. I've had multiple other teenagers of my daughter's friends, her boyfriend, have lived with me. It is a family. I take care of my daughter. I take care of her friends when they need it. And currently my daughter's expecting and she is leaving me, and my aunt is moving in with me at the end of the month. I'm not going to live with strangers. I'm not going to rent my basement out to anybody. And I feel like I'm being punished for a home that I purchased in a state that it was in. And I've done nothing wrong.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have right now. I do have one for staff, but.
Councillor Kipp for the delegation.
Well, thank you. Maybe the delegation can tell me, you know that there's a rule that you can have up to 5 different people in your house? You know that you're allowed to have.
I didn't know that I was a rule.
It's a rooming house thing, so you're allowed to have 5 people, different people from different families in your house.
Okay.
So that makes it okay. What about the bedroom in the basement that you say there's a bedroom? Is it unsafe? Is there no window to get in?
There is
and
a
out?
window. To the best of my understanding, it's not large enough to be egress, so I've never put anybody in there to sleep. I've used it as a TV room. I've used it as an office. I have multitudes of animals, so I've used it as space for them and what have you.
Okay. Question through the staff. This report on all of these is missing information for me. It makes it like they're all exactly the same, and it's all like, and I don't know which have stoves, which don't. And I'm concerned with our hunt on secondary suites. Back in the 90s, brought this legislation, helped bring this stuff forward. Langley had a great bylaw we brought forward then, and I'm finding more and more, and I think that's why the motion to follow is important to us, that we're really hunting down some of these suites. And to make them safe, this one doesn't seem to be anybody rented. I don't know if we collected double garbage from it or something, because usually that's typically what we do, is staff would see a double garbage can, and then 6 months later you got an inspector at your house.
To my understanding, the previous owner did rent it as a suite. There were separate basement, what have you, but that's only known to me because of mail from other parties that has come to my address, addressed to the basement, or from Shaw Cable as, trying to facilitate new customers, and they send something to the basement. But I have no idea where that comes from. As far as I understand, this all started with the previous owner, and it was information not disclosed to me on the sale of the house.
Question to staff then. Does staff have how long ago this was brought forward? It doesn't say in the report where any specific one of these original. Typically, a lot of times we put complaints in and when they happened and what. Like, well, I've seen that where it says complaint, the date it was done, everything was done. This report doesn't have that. You get what I mean? Like, it seems they're all cast into one nebulous kind of understanding that they just don't suit the bylaw. So I can't support this one right now. I'd like to see the staff work with the person to see what they could do.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt, you did not have any further questions?
No more of the delegation.
I have a question for you, and I guess Councillor Bestwick's going to come in as well. Are you coming into the delegation? Okay, great, thank you. When you bought the house, you understood that the previous owners had actually had tenants in it?
No, I did not know at that point. I bought the house. It was empty. It had been vacant. I never met the previous owner. I went through my realtor and her realtor. I never met her realtor either. And I was sold the house as a 5-bedroom, single-family dwelling. So at no point did I know there was ever a suite in there. I have learned through conversations from people and from mail that I have received in my mailbox that there must have been a suite, because there are things addressed to the basement. But other than that, I would not have known that. I wouldn't want to live in that basement without having access to the rest of the house. And I wouldn't want to have to go out my front door and around my house back in through the back door to do my laundry when I can walk down the stairs into my basement, into my laundry room. It just makes no sense.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe, do you have a question for the delegation?
Yeah, I do. One just did occur to me. Thank you, Chair. I guess from what I'm hearing, this at one time was a suite, but can you confirm for me that you would be very happy to remove anything from the basement that is making it to be deemed a suite? Is that correct?
Well, according to this letter that I have, which is from the city of Nanaimo, removing one of these amenities deems it not a suite. So if I so choose, I would happily remove the electrical back to the box for the stove, leave the rest of it the way it is. I like it the way it is. I bought it the way it is. I use it the way it is. And I shouldn't have to remove walls from my house because of somebody else's poor judgment.
But if I may, because I'm not still sure the answer to the question, do you wish to technically remove what qualifies it as a suite?
What qualifies it as a suite is written right here.
Yes.
And I am willing to remove one of those things. And if I so choose to make it the stove, is that not then removing it as a suite? Why does the city get to choose what I have to remove?
So I guess where I'm going, thank you very much.
That's what I want. I just want clarification on that. It doesn't make sense.
And so do I. Thank you. So I guess where I'm going, if I may, Mr. Mayor, and maybe this is through you to staff, it seems to me that I see nothing wrong with supporting the staff recommendation and having staff work with the delegation to remove what needs to be removed so that the city's happy and you're happy and we don't have to go through this again.
Yeah, and hopefully it won't cost me thousands of dollars because of the city's decision.
I hope not. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
That was more or less through you to staff as well, working with this person, because I'm taking you at face value and assuming that what you're saying is correct, and I believe you. I think back to when we were living over on the mainland and we bought one of those up and down houses where you either went up the stairs or down the stairs, and there was everything you needed for a suite in that basement, but we used it as a playroom for our kids. And I would hate to have thought that the municipality of Delta would have come along and told me I had to start tearing stuff out when I wasn't using it as a suite. So I think we really need to work with you to make sure that that both our needs and yours are met, and so I'm asking staff if they could do that and see if we can't come up with something that works for everybody.
Thank you. So as it stands right now, if I'm hearing a motion coming forward to remove this item and refer this one back to staff.
Make that motion to remove 339 View Street from this and have staff meet with the owner to consider the alternatives.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Buswick. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded to remove that one and refer it back to staff. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Move receipt of the delegation to approach.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
So the next one is 9 Acacia Avenue and 106 Wakesaya. Is there anyone wishing to speak to either one of those? The second time, anyone wishing to speak to any one of those? And for the third and final time? Seeing none, can I have a mover for the motion, please?
Section 72 and 73 of the Community Charter order the owners of 9 Acacia, 106 Wakesaya to remove the unauthorized suites and illegal construction to bring their properties into compliance within 30 days.
Is there a seconder? Second. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you very much. Discussion, Councillor Fuller.
Just to go back to something Councillor Kidd said. Every one of these is exactly the same except for the address. It's all cookie cutter. They're the exact same. Alterations were done without a building permit as required, blah, 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 blah. Oops, I'm into that blah, blah, blah habit again. So every one of them is the same. I don't know what makes this a suite, what doesn't make it a suite. Apparently, I'm thinking that they all have doors that close to their basement, God forbid I ever have a door that, oh my, yeah, actually I've got one right now. Even in the carriage house, we've got a door into the crawl space that, could be considered, as I say, you could have induction stoves. Anything could be considered a secondary suite nowadays. So everything's the same. I don't know what's the difference between these. It doesn't say whether they've been charging double water rates, garbage. Does it say whether the suites were constructed before 2005? Doesn't say anything in here. So I'm not going to support any of them at this point.
Thank you. See no further speakers. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show that Councillor Kipp and Councillor Fuller are opposed. Motion passes. Next item. Advisory Committee Commission minutes. Move all three.
And Grants Advisory Subcommittee.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Hong, thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is other business. Councillor Fuller, notice of motion. The first, prior to that motion, we have a delegation. Mr. Don Bonner. Thank you for being so patient, sir.
Anyway, so glad we're getting it done now. Thank you, Council. Don Bonner, Nanaimo, still have. I stand before Council with the hope that Council will turn down this motion. It is an ill-thought-out motion for the number of reasons. First off, the report request is not mentioned. How is Council going to know when they have the report that they have to consider if it's not specifically mentioned in the motion? Second, the motion has no timeline. If staff never provides the report to the Council, the motion would stay in effect forever. Regarding number one, presently there are around 1,200 secondary suites on a list at City Hall that staff could be looking into. This includes secondary suites in duplexes and in single-family homes. Staff doesn't have the manpower to inspect all the suites, so are relying on complaints to act on them. So number one is already being done, and you don't need a motion to enforce something that's already being done. Plus, even if there were enough staff to inspect all the properties, this part of the motion puts the city in a very bad risk position. If city staff know that a suite is unsafe and fail to do anything about it, then is it not the city liable for loss of life and property if the suite burns down? Finally, one can subvert the motion merely by going down to City Hall, getting a list of all the properties on their list, and making a formal complaint about all of them, at which point you're right back to where you are now, and this is a badly written motion. Regarding number two, known suites that are in contravention of zoning are only duplexes. Of the over 1,200 suites known in the city, only 17 duplexes have active files with another 48 still to be visited. The 17 represents 1.3% of the known illegal suites in the city, so you are making a motion for 1.3% of the problem of illegal suites. In addition to the very small number, only one of those 17 have made a presentation to Council about their duplex, to my knowledge. Finally, there's no definition of life safety issues. Practically, the entire building code is about life safety issues. That's why we have a building code, so that buildings don't fall down, catch on fire, or make people sick. I also don't believe that Council has the authority to supersede the building code as its provincial law. Council can't cherry pick which parts of the building code to enforce and which ones not to enforce. Council neither has the knowledge nor expertise to advise what is a safety concern in the building code. I therefore call on Council to vote against this motion and leave staff to do the job of protecting life and property of renters and future buyers, like they have been doing all along. There are many, many more ways that council can use or council can do to create affordable housing in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? See none? Thank you, sir. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Brennan. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Council, it's getting to 10:58. We need, according to this clock here, I'm just going to check the other one here, 10:55. We've got 5 minutes. Thank you. So the next item is an item from Councillor Bestwick to rise and report.
Wait a minute. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Getting late.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. So we need a mover and a seconder for the motion. It's moved by Councillor. Okay, moved by Councillor Fuller. Seconded. Councillor Kemp. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Brennan.
I would just like the motions to be called in seriatim, please.
Seriatim?
Yep.
Thank
please.
you. Council have any objection to that? Seeing none, by consensus, we'll do them by seriatim. Councillor Fuller.
I apologize to staff for being told that they're helping me with this motion. Really, that what you came up with wasn't that good. I think you did a great job in helping with this motion. It works. It's not exactly what I wanted, but with your help, we came up with what we've got. With regards, my understanding is that staff actually do search out. If there are properties that have 2 garbage, 2 water, etc., and have had for a number of years, they are going after those properties on the basis of, my understanding is, you're starting at streets with A, B, C, D. But staff does actually search out those suites, do they not?
Thank you. Your Worship, first of all, 2 things. Our finance staff identify homes with suites for the purpose of charging second user rate. So once those are identified, they're put on our suites user rate list. And as staff work through the secondary suites, we refer to that list and inspect suites off of that list. And I think that's what you heard the delegation tonight. There's approximately 1,200 buildings currently on our user rate list, and we're sort of slowly, and we have been for the last 10 years, methodically working our way through that list, in addition to responding to complaints that we get about secondary suites.
Yeah, so
it's 2 ways that we end up inspecting suites.
Yeah, so it's unfair to say that you're not doing one thing and only doing another. Now, my understanding also is Section 57, which is the first thing put on title, that alleviates liability of the city once you do the Section 57?
It reduces liability.
Thanks. So what we're trying to do with both of these motions, and we'll do them in seriatim, I don't have a problem with that. There's a number of things we're trying to do here. We are trying, one of our priorities is an affordable housing strategy and comprehensive. So revisiting our secondary suite policy would be a part of that. There's a number of other policies that would also hold true in housing. When we demand that a house be torn down if it's going to cost 75% of the assessed value, the density bonusing policy that we have. So there's a number of things that we need to look at, secondary suites being one of them. What we're also seeing is a huge decrease in vacancy rates in this town. I try and house homeless people, and I am having problems. And so when we do eliminate some of these suites that might not meet the code safety standards, but do have access, multiple access points, do have smoke detectors, maybe not wired in, but battery operated. When we eliminate these, people have to find places to live, and at this point, it's getting extremely hard to find places to live. A number of years back, we had a less than 1% vacancy rate, and I would love to know what the vacancy rate in Nanaimo is now. Not what it was the last time we did stats in 2008 or 2012, but I'd like to know what the vacancy rate is now. So if we limit the inspection, and I'll just work on the first one, if we limit the inspection of secondary suites to only those units for which formal complaints have been received, that allows us to step back a bit. I also believe twice in the past we have put holds on all of the secondary suite stuff, I think. I'm not sure of the exact word. I have problems with certain words. I know the meanings of them, but I just can't think of the word offhand. But I believe twice in the past we put a hold on secondary suites and going in, inspecting, and shutting them down. So this would not be unusual. So this is partly...
Councillor Fuller, I've got to interrupt you for a moment. I've been reminded by the clerk that we're at 11 o'clock, and we need a motion to proceed beyond the hour of 11. Councillor Hong? You're moving that motion? Thank you. Seconder?
I'm seconding it. No one wants to stay after 11.
Councillor Kipp is seconding the motion. Thank you.
Could have laughed.
All those in favor?
Oh, well. Okay.
Pardon me? 1, 2, 3. All those opposed? Motion fails.
All right.
Meeting
Motion
adjourned.
We'll have to bring this back the next time. And we can't do the rise and report.
Yeah, but